You are listening to Ras Temari Radio, Offense Necessary, where we discuss everything but politics. We're here with our good friend and recurring guest, Kidus.
Yo, it's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. So we were talking about, and I guess I should begin by asking you, what is something that you taught yourself? Because you have a background not just in film, which we've discussed the last couple times you've been here, but in music as well.
Yeah. So I'm a self-taught guitarist. Still learning in many ways. Aspiring musician, I'd say. So I worked in a few bands. And that's my, I'd say I'm trying, I always try to do, you can always play the live circuit, it's fun. But it's more challenging to actually do, challenging and fulfilling as a musician, to actually try to do something unique. And for the past few years, I would say, I'm trying to work on a rock, probably like an Ethiopian rock band. And that went well here and there, but it also has a challenge. So that's where I am now.
And you've, in the past, we were talking about this off air, the difference between what you understand as a lyrical artist and a musical artist.
Yeah.
I mean, artist as a musician.
Yeah.
But somebody who's driven more by music, more by lyrics. And we got into it last time off air about our feelings about specific examples of this. But first of all, lay out for us what you mean by a musician who's driven more by the musical skill or the musical output, and somebody that's more by the lyrics.
Lyrical. So I guess the simplest way to explain it is I can explain it by example, which is if an artist has fans that don't speak his language, which we can talk about Michael Jackson, we can talk about Macarena, we can talk about even Ethiopian artists of the 60s and 70s that have a lot of French fans. If a musician has fans that don't understand the language, almost all the time he's a musical artist, because what makes his music great is the melody or the rhythm or the musical aspects of it, the same way we enjoy Songbird. A lyrical artist is one who wouldn't have fans outside of his language. You wouldn't find many fans of Bob Dylan if they don't speak any English. You wouldn't find fans of a lot of contemporary Ethiopian musicians. You wouldn't find fans outside of Ethiopia because it's a little too focused on the lyrics.
Right. I mean, the one musician singer that came out of Ethiopia that was popular elsewhere in certain places like Japan was Ram Gassasa, who I personally, growing up, listening to Ethiopian music and never being a big fan of Ethiopian music, partly because I had trouble understanding language, because I speak Amharic, but I have some limitations. Even though I didn't always understand what Ram was saying, I loved Ram. I still do, because of the power of his voice, because of the melody of some of his hit songs, So yeah, you have a point there where it doesn't translate. If it's based on lyrics, it's more like literature.
Exactly. So most musicians that you can think of, you can actually classify based on those two types. Even popular musicians.
Right.
More often than not, when an artist is really popular, he's a musical artist.
Yeah.
You can think of the greatest artists of the decades, and Michael Jackson, Madonna, any genre.
Sure.
A lot of times it's musical.
Sometimes they don't even write anything.
They don't write anything.
I don't think Michael Jackson's ever written anything. Nobody cares.
He writes he writes actually. He doesn't produce, but he writes the melody. He comes up
the
with
melody. Okay.
Yeah. So writing, we should say, is not just about the words. It's also about songwriter is also the melody writer.
Sure.
So in Ethiopia, I think that's also a big issue right now, where 60s and 70s was a very musical time. And that's why it still transcends time and country. Mm-hmm. That's why if you go to any live session, on any club, and there's a live thing going on, at least half the set is music from the 70s and 60s.
Correct.
Because it's so memorable. Because there's something about music that's almost, you can't really understand it. It kind of dives deep into what we are, and it speaks to you. It doesn't matter if you don't speak the language; you'll remember it forever.
Sure, and because music is one of those art forms that escapes critical ability. I mean, I read music reviewers, musical critics, and then I go and listen to music they're reviewing, and I'm like, I had no idea what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Somebody once said that writing about music is like dancing about architecture. You know that line?
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect because it's two completely different ways of communicating.
Yeah, you can't write about Anybody who's ever read music criticism would understand exactly what he's talking about. It's ridiculous.
Film criticism, yes, but music criticism.
Because film is a very intellectual sort of, you can communicate it to another person, you can tell them why it's great. But if I tell you a song you've never heard before, and I describe to you why it's great, it doesn't mean anything. That's why most people just say, listen to the song.
Yeah.
You know, they don't. I cannot describe what the song is about.
Right. It's describe music. Yeah.
Unless sometimes current contemporary Ethiopian music, and a lot of times since they're so lyrical, people are impressed by how the storytelling of the lyrics or whatever. It became so. It's almost poetry set to shitty music. Right. Because it is kind of overproduced, and the music on it's. So we need to come back to the time of if you are. I don't know. Getachew Kasa was talking about how back in the day, Getachew Kasa was one of the most melodic songwriters.
Sure.
Yeah. And he said like one song might take him years sometimes, because he has the chorus or he has a verse, not even the lyrics, but just the melody, and he knows it's good and it's catchy. He wants to write a chorus to it that goes well with it. It's not just another good melody, but a melody that kind of goes well with that. And he said, I think it was Wadishalo or one of Wadishalo Addis Ababa, I'm not sure. Addis Ababa. He said it took him 4 years.
Addis Ababa.
Not Addis Ababa, it's
Alamayesha, who just passed away.
Yeah. And I was talking about Addis Ababa. Or Wadishalo, one of them. He said it took him 4 years. And just the melody. Because he had it in his head, he was just working on it. And then when talking about the lyrics, he said lyrics don't matter at all. At the last stage, it's just once you're done with the melody, you just go in the studio, you just make it about something, it doesn't matter. Because it's still going to be a great song, no matter what the lyrics are. Because can many people really tell you what their favorite songs are about? Michael Jackson is one of the worst lyricists of all time, I think so. It doesn't really make sense. It's a little too simplistic.
Yeah. But nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares. That's why it's music and not poetry.
Right. If anything, the words and the lyrics in there, it's not about the content of the lyrics. It's the way that the sound of the words. Right. The sound, not just his voice, but the sound of the words is really what matters. Not so much. Sound is one of the more underrated aspects of poetry, as well as lyricism in general. Sometimes it's really just how something sounds, but again, that escapes criticism. And therefore, it escapes often critical acclaim, and the recognitions that come with it.
Yeah, it's very difficult to sort of measure or quantify. I guess that's why any music awards are usually, nobody takes them seriously.
Right. And you mentioned Bob Dylan in the past as an example of a lyrical artist, which I think at this point in the English language or English-speaking poets or singers, it's hard to deny that Bob Dylan is the ultimate example of that. I mean, Bob Dylan is, I don't think there's ever been a songwriter who's won the Nobel Prize for literature. I don't know if people know this, but Bob Dylan just won, and it was the first American of any kind writer in years to win. I mean, it's been a long time, right? I don't know if Cormac McCarthy hasn't won it, but Foster Wallace, maybe it's been a while though, right? I mean, it was a while. I think more recently, but Toni Morrison won it more recently, right? It's an American woman. But anyway, Bob Dylan he won a Nobel Prize for literature, not for songwriting, because there's no such thing. And I don't think he even wanted to go and accept it because he's like too cool for everything. But yeah, of course. But somebody wrote he's just kind of wasting their precious time, which is a reference to one of his greatest songs. Don't think twice, it's all right. But Bob Dylan famously was asked once, in that era where everybody was asking him questions and he was just making fun of them the way he answers, like the congressman who almost like in a congressional subcommittee asked him, how many of you songwriters and poets are there out there dwelling in the wilderness of the this and that, blah, 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 blah. He thinks he's a songwriter himself, describing this as he's asking the question. And Bob Dylan goes, how many? And he goes, yeah, how many? He goes, I'd say about 136. Either that or 142, right? And then some other woman asked him, it's ridiculous. The question, it's ridiculous. But some question asked him, it's even an issue. Some other woman asked him, so do you consider yourself more of a poet or a songwriter? Right? And he goes, no, I think of myself more as a song and dance man.
I think
right. It's one of his more famous where he makes fun of. I mean, he's not being mean. He's teasing.
Interviews are as fun as his music.
Oh yeah. Somebody asked him, what does this mean? He goes, well, I don't know. What does that tie mean? Like this whole thing with. So he has this flippant way of dismissing. Yeah. But at the same time, that's an important. The fact that a person would ask him, what are you? How many people are there like you? Right? Because. There was Woody Guthrie, and he's part of a certain tradition, right, of the folk singer, but not entering the mainstream, and then changing who he is, reinventing himself. I made this point to you when we talked about this, that to me there's an obvious parallel between Bob Dylan and Jay-Z. in more recent years. Because Jay-Z, especially a song like On to the Next One, he's talking about, the rest there in the same spot. Me, I'm dodging raindrops, meaning I'm on vacay. I got to keep it moving, Yeah. It's all about, even in the song Regrets, right? In order to survive, you got to learn to live with regrets. It's all about self-reinvention. Bob Dylan, No Direction Home. She's an artist. She don't look back. Right? It's all about, I'm going to find me a new Bob Dylan. See how that one fits me. That's one of his famous lines, right? So there is that need to keep changing, reinventing yourself if you're both a great artist and a great commercial artist.
But I think in both cases, I'd say that they're how much they reinvented themselves is an exaggeration. Because they do kind of alter their styles to a certain extent within a certain bracket of sound or style. Because there is artists that completely change themselves. Even them, you could say it's not that much, but it's definitely way more than these artists. I think David Bowie, let's reinvented himself the way wider range than either of those artists.
I agree. David Bowie's all about reinvention.
Exactly. Some artists are about, they're way better at reinvention. Or at least, it feels like if you know David Bowie or Beck also.
Beck, yeah. That's a good example.
Because if we're talking about those guys, then how much Bob Dylan reinvented himself almost seems like it's the wrong word to use for him. Because he definitely kind of alienated his fans by going electric at that stage, and also kind of
they were calling him Judas, and he's Jewish, so it's pretty offensive.
But it's only reinvention in a very small context. He didn't completely. It's not like Bob Dylan started doing disco. You know what I mean? I mean, he has various influences in his music, but it's still Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan music will always be Bob Dylan. If somebody went into a coma in the 70s and woke up today and you played him the latest Bob Dylan album, he's not going to be that shocked. It's not like Bob Dylan is rapping. I mean,
maybe
he's
in
always
the
been
70s.
rapping in the sense, you know what I
Well,
mean?
maybe in the 70s, but by then he had already reinvented himself like 2 or 3 times by the time we got to the 70s, right? But I see what you mean. He maintains his style, especially a vocal style.
No matter how much you say change, I think Kanye changed himself way more than Jay-Z.
Yeah, see, I disagree, but it's also because, and I don't want to play the whole, I've heard something you haven't, but if for people who are interested in Jay-Z and discovering who Jay-Z really is, please listen to the first album from 1996, Reasonable Doubt, because every album he did after that, because he's a commercial artist who tried to reinvent himself, every year he would put out another album. So obviously the lyrical content is not as important. He understood that people are mostly driven by music. Yeah. What you just said, people are mostly driven by musical content, and lyrical content is a nice bonus to have. But most people aren't. 90% of your audience isn't paying attention to what you're saying. Yeah. If anything, it's how you say it.
Just the chorus.
Correct.
Just the chorus.
Just the chorus, or maybe a few lines here and there, where he captures your imagination. I'm focused, man. He has these ways of really getting. Yeah. But so he has that ability to deliver a memorable line. But then you listen to Reasonable Doubt and you realize, boy, if Jay-Z wanted, because he was 26 when that album came out, so it was the culmination of 20-something years of him thinking and writing.
That's always the best.
It's usually the case, especially in a commercial art form. Yeah. And that was part of a wave of albums. I wrote about this recently in the Link Up, right? A wave of albums, the mid-90s New York hip-hop revival, of all these artists who are still heralded. It's now been 25 years. But none of them really, the Fugees, Nas, Wu-Tang, Raekwon, Mobb Deep, Biggie Smalls, none of them, Biggie Smalls died, but none of them really ever captured what they were able to do in that first album. And Jay-Z is one of those with Reasonable Doubt. And if you thought that...
hip-hop's not really an album genre, I guess, so much.
It's not. Yeah. It's not. So, and those songs aren't necessarily... It's not like he did, you mentioned David Bowie. It's not like he did, Reasonable Doubt is a concept album like Ziggy Stardust or something like that. But
it is a concept album to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, but it's like you said, it's hip hop's not album driven, right? Yeah. So those songs of you can appreciate them as hit songs if you wanted to. But all I'm saying is the lyrical skill that Jay-Z displays is and a lot of especially older hardcore hip hop fans could go on rhapsodizing about this. That's why everybody respects Jay-Z. Yeah. It's not about the fact that he understood that it's all about production and he only works with best producers or his skills as a businessman, right? Or his freestyling abilities, or his dressing abilities, or his good looks. Let's say it's not what's selling. It's the fact that everybody respects what he proved in his first album, and every so often he will still do. He can back it up, right? And not so many millionaires can really back it up. So anyway, I wanted to make that point about Jay-Z for younger audiences who don't necessarily understand the level of his contribution. But we were talking about lyrical versus musical, and where we disagreed was not really on Bob Dylan or on Jay-Z. When we talked, it was about Kurt Cobain. For people who don't know, Kurt Cobain is probably the most prominent figure in the grunge movement, which just came and went like a comet. But he came out of Seattle. He's from Seattle, from the suburbs of Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. It's early to mid-'90s. It's grunge music. Grunge music is sort of hardcore. It's rock. Hardcore. Yeah, and they still have long hair. Like, it's a reaction to 80s hair metal.
It's a reaction to, the glam era.
The glam era. It's grimy. There's no glamour in it. It's much more emotional. It's much more artistic. It's countercultural or subcultural, or at least it seems to be. And you have some thoughts on that, about the contradictions in what Kurt Cobain... So Kurt Cobain is the most significant figure from this, along with maybe Eddie Vedder and a couple of other people. Many of whom have died. Lane Staley died. The other guy, died. Chris Cornell, committed suicide recently, or some years ago. Kurt Cobain committed suicide with a shotgun in 94 at age 20. He's one of the 27 Club. Yeah. The many artists who died at 27. Yeah. But still, Kurt Cobain, brilliant artist, gone too young, and this figure of the grunge music. I think he's also a phenomenal songwriter. You disagree?
Songwriter, I agree. Songwriter, yes, I agree.
Okay, with lyricist.
Yes, lyricist, yeah.
Poet.
Poet, no, I definitely disagree, because one is, we can look at it three ways. One is why is he influential? Why did he get so many fans?
Right.
It's not about his lyrics. Because in a lot of his songs, his lyrics are, you can barely hear what he's saying.
Often, true.
Yeah, and second way to look at it is what he actually says about his songwriting, which is he admits that lyrics are an afterthought. Lyrics are at least he doesn't have to sing gibberish.
Right.
You know what I mean? And because he would want to, if he could. But I remember reading that him saying that he wrote lyrics in the studio right 5 minutes before recording, because what's important to him is he gets the melody and the arrangement and the chords right. And then, because the whole way when you're writing a song, it's just it's just random sounds, right? Then you can't record that, so he has to find words to it, whatever fits. And the third one was actually to read the lyrics, which a lot of them are, you can derive meaning from them if you really try. And some songs, yes, have certain
some songs. That's the point I was making too. But some of it is gibberish, some of it isn't.
Yeah, but not even some. I would say very few. I would say "Rate Me" is at least kind of there. "Paulie" is one thing. You know, those songs have meaning at least.
What about "Something in the Way"? The song we were listening to when we had this conversation.
"Something in the Way," I think I haven't read the
right. So the lyrics, I'll say real quick because he repeats the same short verse twice. Yeah. Real quick, he says, "Underneath the bridge, the tarp has sprung a link, and the animals I've trapped have all become my pets, and I'm living off the glass.
Talk about living off
and the drippings from the ceiling, but it's okay to eat fish because they don't have any feeling." I don't think he wrote that 5 minutes before he went in. Now, you might say that's a goofy sort of not troll character, but it's kind of perfect.
It's kind of perfect. The fact that he lived under, he was homeless and he lived under a bridge for a while.
And he did
something in the way it also, I would say, it definitely has a sort of seriousness and a gravitas that most of the songs do not have. So I would say that also would happen, but he's not famous for those songs.
What about, I agree. So the songs that they're famous for, this is why I said that as much as I like their most famous album, which is Nevermind, the album that they did after that, and the one before that actually, Bleach. I think are better, right?
Bleach. And you prefer Bleach over Nevermind?
I do.
Really?
And ultimately I prefer In Utero more, because again, the songwriting is more important. So for instance, In Utero has a song called Frances Farmer Will Have Her Revenge on Seattle, which is one of their 3 or 4 best songs. Again, from a musical standpoint, yes. I think everybody can recognize it. Yeah. But the chorus is very simple. It's, "I miss the comfort in being sad. I miss the comfort in being sad." And it's about a woman who captured that sense of... It's a real woman named Frances Farmer, who's this gorgeous blonde actress. When he says, "We'll have her revenge on Seattle," I miss the comfort in being sad. She's a woman who captured melancholy. And there's joy in melancholy in a lot of her characters. that she portrayed on screen. And then she was foul-mouthed and difficult, even though she was a classic blonde beauty, or maybe because she thought she could get away with anything. And she was railroaded by the legal system, sent to a mental hospital in Seattle by a lot of the judges. And they even say in one of their documentaries, a lot of these people who screwed over poor Frances Farmer, they're living in downtown Seattle in those luxury apartments. People they hate because of the class conscious
story.
And the villains of their story too. Yeah. All these fancy rich people in the downtown Seattle, the judges and all that, their families, they're still there. And Frances Farmer, I mean, they talk about her having been gang raped and humiliated and whatever when she was in that insane asylum. These are the old days of insane asylums in the United States. Frances Farmer will have her revenge on Seattle. That song is not, he didn't write that in 5 minutes before he went on there, right? And so also, the other thing I would add is, Bob Dylan made similar pronouncements, turning to Joan Baez famously and saying, 500 years now people are going to be asking, all these assholes are going to be asking, where did I come up with this lyric? And not that so much as, where did I come up with these lyrics? And I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what it even means. And he kind of giggles, right? Because again, it's the intentionality isn't always like, let me sit down and write a song about such and such and such thing. It kind of comes naturally from a train of images. There isn't a clear distinction between something that's completely accidental and something that's completely intentional. And there was another example that.
But there's another question you could ask yourself. There's a lot of music critics or whatever ask this when they interview musicians. Songwriters, at least. You write the melody first?
The melody first, the lyrics first, right? Yeah.
More writers like Bob Dylan, I guarantee they write the lyrics first. Bob Dylan is the type of artist, he is the type of artist that has notebooks full of lyrics, right?
Right.
And then
so did Jay-Z.
And then he comes down, hip-hop is absolutely lyrical art. But you have some artists which have, poetry, like notebooks full of poetry, and they sit down and they find a sort of chord progression to go with it, and they can tell with their melody also, because their melody they're not too melodic. Or another way to put it is can you whistle a song and people will know what song you're whistling?
Right.
There's no way you can whistle a Bob Dylan song and people know that it's any song at all.
I don't know. I think you could whistle "The Man in Me" or blowing in the wind. If I whistle, I'm not going to do it.
Knocking on heaven's door.
Yes, I think you can recognize those melodies.
But those are the exceptions in his repertoire.
Right, I agree. There are always exceptions. I think
those are the few
exceptions. And that's not why he's well known.
Exactly.
It's not because of melody. I completely agree.
You get some great lines, not just phrases. Every songwriter, I think, has phrases. Because that's what I mean. Like Kurt Cobain also has, you might find 2 lines that have such depth and meaning in every song of his, right? But the question is, did he write any of his songs because he wrote a whole set of lyrics, he finished the lyrics, and he thought, we need to find music for this? Or did he finish it like a child, rambling some melody, and then thought, I need words for this song?
So,
is the song there when the lyrics are done, or is the song there when the melody's done?
The other example, and the reason I don't think it matters, right? I don't think it matters because just because something came first doesn't mean it's more important.
I think it absolutely matters.
Well, just because something came first doesn't mean it's more important. So I'll give you an example.
That's
famously,
the reason for its existence.
Well, hold on. Paul McCartney made this point when he's told the story many times. The Beatles, one of their most famous songs, MTV had it ranked as the number one most important, not that their opinion really matters, number one most important popular song, greatest pop song of all time. Yesterday, right.
One of the most covered songs.
You remember, the story of how Paul McCartney...
from sleep, and what was it? The lyrics? Scrambled eggs?
Scrambled eggs. Oh, my baby, how I love your legs. He came up with the melody first, and then eventually he found the right lyrics. Yeah. That doesn't mean the lyrics don't matter.
No, the lyrics... I'm not saying the lyrics don't matter. What I'm saying is... Do you think on the Yesterday was a good example. Yesterday is one of the most covered songs of all time, and it's one of the best songs of all time. There's no question about it, right?
Right.
Is it because if you met somebody who's never heard Yesterday, let's say, right? There's a lot of them in Ethiopia. You met somebody and then you showed them the lyrics, just the lyrics, right?
Yeah.
You read it as poetry. Would he agree that it's one of the it's fantastic poetry, or would he find it too simplistic? I think he would find it absolutely too simplistic.
Yesterday.
The power. All my troubles seem so far away.
All my troubles seem so far away. Now it seems as though they're here to stay.
I
believe in yesterday. Why she had to go. But see,
it seems like a kindergarten rhyme. The reason it's powerful is the melody is so haunting that it fits the lyrics so well. The melody is the type that would stick in your head, and the melody is haunting.
But
that's also
also
important. Does the melody fit the lyrics?
But I get what you're saying, and I completely agree. Like form and content. Anybody who studied poetry, they tell you form and content are inseparable. That's ideally, they're supposed to mirror each other. One is not supposed to carry the other, right?
But form in poetry and form in music are very different.
Exactly. That's the point I was going to make. Is that not just form, but also content, because the lyrics in Yesterday are, if you were to read them as poetry, they'd be crap. Or they'd be simplistic.
But the melody, I think, is good.
But no, I got you. Great. But songwriting, even if you write a song,
like and put it on lyric, right?
Right, I got you. But songwriting, even if you write a song on a paper.
Oh, cool. By songwriting, lyrics, you mean lyrics?
Yes, the lyrics. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Specify. Songwriting is also melody. Paul McCartney is also songwriting.
Okay. The writing of the words in a song on a piece
of
paper.
Writing the lyrics.
It's the words in a song. Yes. Okay. The writing of it down. You write it down and you show it to somebody. Mm-hmm. If they know it's a song, they could still go, oh my God, as I'm sure many people would have. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't react to it well as poetry, but as a song, even
without knowing the melody.
Without knowing the melody, just reading it as song lyrics on a paper, on a page, mm-hmm. they would be like, wow, this has a lot of potential. Now, you still need to hear the music, but you know,
talking about the audience, right? Not fellow
what I'm trying to say is song lyrics as an art form of writing song lyrics without the music has to be seen with a different set of. It's not the same as poetry, right? It's not understood the same way. Yeah. It often is a little bit simpler, and often is but that's still, but it still has measurable value. It doesn't have to be seen in the lens through the lens of what it would be like as a poem.
As a poem, absolutely. Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like when people, I think Bob Dylan's lyrics can work as poetry. A lot of these lyrical artists also publish their lyrics books as poetry books. Leonard Cohen did that, right? Jim Morrison did that, even though I'm not a fan of his lyrics.
Oh God!
But Leonard Cohen again, I think is one of the best lyricists.
Very good.
Ever. Probably better than Dylan, I think, because you could just read his lyrics and it feels like poetry.
It is poetry.
It's proper poetry, and it's set to music. That's what it is. Set to music, and so like true lyrical artists, I think they can publish their lyrics as poetry and it'll still have value because their whole thing is the lyrics. Whereas, because Bob Dylan, it's not just, because musicians have three things, I think. It's not just music and lyrics. There's also persona. Dylan is very strong with that. The character of Dylan is he's charismatic. Like you said, how well you do on interviews is very important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like one of the most, there's a shit ton of talented genius songwriters and singers that are lost in the crowd because
they don't have star power.
They don't have star power, exactly. Yeah. That X factor, what they call it, right? So Dylan has that. Cobain has that. Kurt Cobain absolutely has that.
Without question.
He practiced it since he was a kid.
Yeah, without question.
And so I would say that his skill, and he knew it, was as long as he had a certain sound and a certain X factor when it comes to character. The fact that he goes to MTV Music Awards without washing his hair and he has a little stubble and he's wearing his pajamas.
Because he's good looking and he knows it.
That's not just that he's good. No, good looking is definitely part of the part of the appeal. But it's the fact that he doesn't care. That was so unique because a few years before him was Madonna and Michael Jackson, who didn't even look human. They were wearing gold and stuff, and they were going the royal route. And then
subversive.
His second album, cool, was Nevermind. By the time it was released, they only published, I think, 100,000 copies, or very few, because they didn't think it could actually sell that much.
Correct.
And Michael Jackson's album was number one at that point, because glam was all the craze. Michael Jackson's Dangerous album, I think. And then at that point, you have kids, wearing makeup and the hair and the spray and all that stuff, and all of a sudden, this album called Nevermind by a guy who doesn't care enough to not wear pajamas or wear a regular T-shirt to an award show.
Oh, well, actually
surpassed Michael Jackson.
Right.
Next thing you know, he's not going to change that look.
No.
He's not. That's the point of it, isn't it?
There are bands like Silverchair that were sold by MTV because there were younger kid versions of that look, the flannel and the hair. And
so, I mean, you can say that about any look or any vibe. Right. Regular label owners and corporations don't know what sells. They just only know to replicate it.
Sure. But I get what you're saying, and that's why co-optation is a constant process.
That's what I meant by Kurt Cobain is not... I don't think he wanted to be known for his lyrics. Is he an artist? Absolutely. He's one of the best. His melodies and his style. Kurt Cobain's songs, because there are two types of great artists. There's the type of great artists that a lot of people copy, right? For instance, Michael Jackson, who's great, and then you have so many Michael Jackson sort of clones to this day. The Weeknd is a huge Michael Jackson clone.
Exactly.
Right? You have so many of those. Yeah. And then there's some artists.
As much as I love.
There's some artists they're great and people want to copy them, but they literally can't.
Right.
Quentin Tarantino is a great example of this. People cannot possibly. They try. You see him try and they fail. You see him fail spectacularly. Kurt Cobain is one of those artists where you how many songs have you heard ever since Nirvana which you thought, man, that could have been Kurt Cobain? You never hear any song like that, right? Ever. It's so unique. And that's his genius. It's not his lyrics. It's that he has these unique melodies and chord progressions which seem almost like they're written by a toddler.
Yeah, they're very simple.
Very simple, but somehow
they're easy to play, right?
You can't copy them.
Can't copy
It's impossible.
I agree with you. And that is a major part.
His genius, yeah.
Maybe the majority of his genius. I don't like sitting and quantifying things that can't be quantified. Mm-hmm. I still think that often, not always, but often there are great lyrics to, at the very least, accompany that. But
absolutely, I agree. I'm not saying he's a bad lyricist, but I'm saying that he's not. That's not the point of his appeal.
Not like Bob Dylan. I think we all agree.
Exactly,
Not like Bob
Dylan. Yeah.
Of course. And these things are always on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. It's not one or the other. But I suppose with Kurt Cobain, there was an ambivalence to Kurt Cobain that they openly and self-consciously explore in Nirvana. The first line I mentioned of In Utero, which I still think is their best album, their last album, is of a great song called Serve the Servants. For those who are listening and want to find about Nirvana, me personally, I recommend Serve the Servants, Heart Shaped Box, Francis Farmer, right? Probably Penny Royalty, and then maybe Something in the Way. Everything from the third album, and then Something in the Way. As much as, by the way, I like Nevermind. I'm not saying I don't like Nevermind. I just think these albums are, because those are more anthemic, sort of arena rock.
Absolutely. I think that's what symbolizes Nirvana. And if you, also more suggestions, what I would suggest that are symbolic of Nirvana is Lithium, Come As You Are, Smells Like Teen Spirit, obviously.
Right. All from Nevermind. All from Nevermind. Which are a little bit more
Something in the Way also, which is in Nevermind, great. Like, it kind of doesn't belong there. That's what it kind of feels like.
All of which are more like the anthemic arena rock that they're reacting to. They're more like the hair metal bands. A little bit, an angstier version. Yeah. In Utero and the first one, Bleach, are much more in the punk tradition, or much more dissonant and much more subversive, and not as they didn't sell as well. They're not as mainstream.
I guess that's why you like Bleach, because that's also very dissonant.
Well, that's not why I like Bleach. I think Bleach is... I think context matters, and I think Bleach is just kind of a work of... the subversiveness that they accomplish in Bleach, the originality that they accomplish in Bleach, they can never ever replicate. The reason I like In Utero isn't because it's subversive or dark or original. Yeah. The reason I like In Utero is that the lyrical complexities and lyrical ambiguity, and also the songwriting in other ways, the songwriting itself, both melodically and lyrically. So as an example, the first song, Serve the Servants, right, where he says, teenage angst has paid off well. Now I'm bored and old. That's the way he starts off, and he's only 27 or 26, right? But he's like, but he thinks, now I'm bored and teenage angst has paid off well. Now I'm bored and old. And the whole song is "Serve the Servants," which is the relationship between the figure, the musical rock figure, and the popular musical figure, and the rock hero, and an audience of servants, which is to say, working class, regular neighborhood. So he's serving the servants, right?
So one of the people that he used to be.
Right, and in a song like that, he's describing the ambivalence that drives it. I mean, even MTV did an early documentary about Nirvana where they were saying this was their thesis: is the defining contradiction. You see it in all his notebooks. You see it in some of the areas. We want to be famous. No, we don't care. No, we don't. And a lot of it is like one last point I'll make. A lot of it is sort of like the way stand-up comedians. I've heard them argue about this. I remember HBO had a 1-hour sit-down of like Louis C.K. and Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Ricky Gervais, talking funny. And this is the argument that they're getting into, is like, you're supposed to not care. Well, you're not being there to be judged. It's not a personality contest. Like Ricky Gervais says that. Louis C.K. kind of agrees. And Jerry Seinfeld was like, whoa, now you're in the wrong artist. Nobody's more judged than him. Like you're the guy who cares the most. I mean, you're standing up there talking to somebody. You're the guy who's more judged, who's more dissected, who more relies on being likable. But that's the whole paradox, and that's what the beauty of it is. That on the one hand, You're supposed to show up there and seem like you're not care at the MTV Awards. As you said, Cobain and disheveled and not having showered and compared to Michael Jackson. But you do that because the person who doesn't seem like they care is the person who cares. I'll give you, for those in the audience who watched Game of Thrones, the entrance of Tywin Lannister is one of my favorite scenes in Game of Thrones. The season 1. It's the one where he's cutting up the stag. Is it when Tywin Lannister first? I know you're not a fan of Game of Thrones. Tywin Lannister was one of my favorite characters, and it's a great performance by Charles Dance. He's cutting up the stag, which is the symbol of it's a real stag actually, like a deer, which is the symbol of the Baratheons, who they're about to.
That's his entrance. That's first season.
Yeah. He walks in. It's like 7 episodes in. You finally see Tywin Lannister, and out of the corner of his eye, he's cutting up Jaime, his son, because he's the power guy. Tywin Lannister is Vito Corleone in a world that is supposed to be a combination of The Godfather and Lord of the Rings. That's the brilliance of Game of Thrones. It's those two. It's a gang family mafia.
You make it actually sound better than it is.
It is, but it is that good. Anyway, a mafia family story, crime unit family as families story set in Tokyo. Correct. War.
I mean, it's a day-to-day stuff.
Right.
I mean, you can set a historical drama about that time and kind of condense it to make it soap opera-ish. That would have been Game of Thrones.
Correct. And I completely agree. But he's turning his eye and he's looking at Jaime and he's dissecting him and he says, "You care so much about what people think of you," because he was like, "Why didn't you kill Ned Stark? You could have killed Ned Stark. You're the better swordsman. You're the best swordsman. Why don't you kill Ned Stark? Why is he still alive?" And he goes, "It wouldn't have been clean." Blah blah. And he laughs out and he goes, "You care too much about what people think of you," and Jaime goes, "I could care less what people think of me." And Tywin goes, "That's what you want people to think of you." That's what this is. That's what Kurt Cobain is dealing with. That's what the stand-up comedian is dealing with. That's what Norm Macdonald was dealing with. The more I care, the more I have to convince myself in that moment that I don't care, and convince the audience that I don't care, and that's how they'll end up liking me.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the more you pretend like you shouldn't care.
Yeah,
Dylan
that's
does
the
same things.
Exactly.
Where you have to pretend like you don't care.
That's what I'm saying. Kurt Cobain and Bob Dylan have a lot in common.
They do.
Bob Dylan was desperate for adulation, desperate for affection.
Dylan was also
desperate
impressed by
for
Kurt Cobain. Did you know that?
He was what?
He was impressed by Kurt Cobain. He was a fan.
Who
of
wasn't?
No, I mean because Dylan is very aloof and
right.
It's not like there's many artists.
Right. He doesn't kiss too many people's rear.
No, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
Neil Young, Dylan, which are like legendary, proper rock stars that don't have to kiss anybody's ass.
Right.
But the fact that they said Kurt Cobain, that kid, I think Neil Young said that kid has heart, and I should have. Neil Young blames himself because in his suicide note he quoted, what was that song?
Oh.
It's better to rust than to burn out.
Oh yeah. Better to burn out than fade away.
Better to burn out than to fade away. Which is antenna lyric, right? Neil Young.
So he feels like he might have.
Yeah, he feels because they also had a connection to it. I mean, they actually used to have. He knew him.
Oh, okay.
A few phone calls, and he thought like I should have,
He feels like he might have unintentionally influenced him to suicide.
Yeah, because that old line, that song, "Hey My My," is about how rock and roll is about dying young and kind of living fast and dying young.
Only the good die young.
It really celebrates how the king is Johnny Rotten and not Elvis. You know what I mean? Because
exactly.
So he feels somehow that he might have not directly sort of glorified that sense of rock star should die young.
Is that just a rock and roll premise, or is that a counterculture premise? Because hip hop has the same thing. Tupac, a lot of his legend is the fact that he died an unsolved murder. Like there's a if not a coolness, there's a lore.
But here's the thing with hip hop, it's
the martyrdom.
It's not intentional, or at least it's not sought after. You know what I mean? With rock stars, there's a sense of I get this with a lot of non-rock fans of us, where they feel, what's wrong with these guys? They clearly want to die, because a lot of them, the heroin overdoses and there's certain suicidal, self-destructive attitude, which is what makes them feel so unhinged. A lot, especially in the class, Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison, and a lot of them dying with their own hands, not necessarily suicide, but up until today, it also. I mean, not anymore, because the drugs are kind of not fashionable. But up until a certain point, rock stars, even though they're famous and they're rich and they have everything that people could want, they end up dying just because they overdose or they kill themselves.
Can I give you two possible?
There's certain self-destructive
absolutely,
which hip hop does not have.
Well, okay. So let me give you two. I mean, if hip hop has it, it's that that death is through gun violence as a result of
you get murdered. Exactly, that's what I mean.
Yeah, but I mean, Tupac and Biggie and others, they probably should have known better. They were young, but they probably should have known better that they were running these kinds of risks and associating with and driving around in the open air in Las Vegas and places like in LA without security.
But not being chicken is kind of part of your persona.
Exactly. So killing yourself, killing yourself is not manly enough to be hip hop. It's not very hip hop. No, I got what you're saying. So here's two possible answers, and I'm just throwing these out as hypotheses. I don't necessarily buy it. One is that it's not in spite of the fact that you have it made, and that everything is working out so and that life is so good that you commit suicide, or that you have death by cop or death by gang, where you create a situation for your own death. I mean, Tupac constantly invited death at his door, right? Biggie Smalls' one major album was called Ready to Die, right? It's not in spite of that.
It's more about the upbringing and society, I think.
It is, but it's. I don't know. I don't mean that he means it literally, but it's still, they kept calling death to their doorstep, and it's not that they did so in spite of the success. It's because if you make it there, David Foster Wallace talked about this, and he committed suicide. One of my favorite writers, right? Died in his 50s, I think, 40s or 50s, about 14 years ago. David Foster Wallace, great American writer. He talks about like how his whole he pursued writing thinking that it would make him happy to achieve fame and success, and then it didn't, and then he goes, and at that point the question becomes, why am I writing? And I think he was dealing with that existential crisis of, if the thing that I pursue is never going to make me happy, then maybe I'll never be happy. It's one thing to be depressed and think you can get out of it, but if you feel like I've worked this hard, I've gotten to this point, and I'm still the same piece of crap and I still can't live with myself. Yeah, that's one thing that might turn you.
Absolutely, I think that is more in line with what rock stars feel, not rappers.
To some extent.
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately why you have suicidal rock stars, or not just rock stars, but Amy Winehouse or those bad pop stars.
Drug addicted.
But with rap, it's not suicidal. It's that they claim to fame in the first place. The reason they're famous, the reason they have fans, is that they have to have this persona, where especially up until, I would say, the middle class rappers started emerging.
And the white ones.
Not just the white ones.
Who doesn't have to ever say that he dealt drugs.
But even the white ones had to pretend like they were from this, Detroit, whatever. Eminem had to pull that. But the middle class, the suburban rappers, starting, Kanye and Kid Cudi and Drake and The Weeknd, all of a sudden rappers are very happy.
J. Cole is from South Carolina.
Exactly. I mean, these guys are there's no chance. I mean, it's very unlikely that they're going to kill themselves, or that they're going to get murdered. It's very unlikely. It's just, but before them, rap used to be about. We have to remember, rap was not consumed, or at least they didn't get money by selling to black people. Rappers got famous and rich because they can sell to white kids. Suburban kids who fantasize about the life of these black gangsters.
Correct, yeah.
That's the people seem to have. I have this conversation a lot of times because I listen to rock music and they're like, you listen to white people music, and they don't understand. If you know a rapper, if a rapper is famous enough for you to know him, then white people love him. There's no question about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
The only black.
So hip hop is white, and also rock is black, because all of the major. First of all, and this is what irritates me. Because I get that all the time, as you might imagine. Oh, you sound white, you dress white, you this way, you that way, and I'm like, well, first of all, maybe it's because I don't have to buy this very reductive idea of what a black person is supposed to be, because I spent time in Senegal and Ethiopia and places where, my father and other people that I knew, academics here, they don't act black either. Ethiopians don't act black, so what is it? Maybe those images of black people are not just reductive and insulting, but they're controlled by white people, because white people control the images.
That's what they expect.
Right. So that's one of the reasons I reject
people need to remember that the image of Tupac and the image of all these rappers that we are fans of, it's not just the image they want to give you, it's the image that the label and the corporation want to give you, because that's what sells the most.
Correct. And
we're talking about Reasonable Doubt, the whole mafioso rap, and that's what white people want to hear.
And furthermore, so hip hop is white, at least in terms of audience, if not in terms of artists, and always has been. Yeah. And furthermore, or at least as long as it's been commercially viable. And secondly, it's a numbers game. I mean, there are just more white people than there are black people who have disposable income, on albums. Yeah. But so that's one thing. And then the second thing is, just as hip hop is white, in terms of audience, not artists. Rock is black in terms of artists, if not audience. So, for instance, B.B. King, Chuck Berry, who I grew up on. My dad was a huge Chuck Berry fan, and we kind of mourned Chuck Berry when he died. All right, Chuck Berry is one of the originals of. I do not want to hear another person tell me that I'm not allowed to listen to rock music because something that was stolen from blues artists in the United States and R&B and so. And then Jimi Hendrix changed how guitar is played. You know, as a guitarist, right? Any guitar player, anybody who's technical, which I'm not, will tell you. Jimi Hendrix completely changed it. So every so often a black guy comes along, a Phil Lynott or B.B. King, and will show white people the way, and then they steal their ideas. Because, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound racist, but that's what white people do, right?
Did you know the origins of punk were not the origins, because punk was like very early with Iggy Pop and all that, but hardcore punk.
Yeah, it's black origins.
These are like hardcore black kids who used to play rock so heavily. But he's thinking you can't sell black people,
right?
With rock. So right. A lot of times it's like what the owner of Sun Records said about before he found Elvis. You know, because rock and roll was invented, right? Elvis still holds the record to this day with the most number of singles in the top.
Right. Although Jay-Z surpassed him as far as #1 albums. He had 11 #1 albums, which surpassed. I think it was Elvis.
I doubt that. Jay-Z has #1 album.
He has, without question, he has the most #1 albums. I believe he surpassed Elvis. Might have been Michael Jackson, but Jay-Z holds the record for the most #1 albums.
But it's still
100%. 100%. Yeah. When he got to 11, that's when it was a big thing, right?
But here's the thing. My point is that Elvis, which is one of the most influential artists of all time, right? You know how he came about? He was a truck driver,
right?
And he had all these rock and rollers, because at this point rock was invented, right? It just wasn't officially invented because nobody was buying it.
It's a good-looking truck driver.
Because like you said, Chuck Berry was around. Chuck Berry was not playing blues at all. He was playing rock and roll. What you consider? John Lennon said, if you want to summarize rock and roll, it's Chuck Berry. That's it. Chuck Berry, great lyrics, great rhythm. He's talking about it's danceable, it's rhythmic, and he invented rock and roll. But nobody's selling it. And then you have this small record label called Sun Records. And then the owner always used to say, if I could find, because black people always play on black radio, right? And I used to do, fun fact, they at that stage they can't really say he's a white artist, right? When the DJ introduces an artist, you can't say that because that's too racist. What he does, he talks about where you went to school.
Right, so it's little signals.
Because back then, like in the 40s and 30s, it was segregated. So he'd tell you he's an artist, he went to school here, and then instantly the audience knows, I'm listening to a white person, it's fine. You know what I mean? But then you also have black radio with T-Bone Walker and Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters and all those. So this owner of a record label always said, famously, if I find a white guy that can move and sing like a black person, I'm going to make $1 billion.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the richest guy ever.
There he did.
There he did. And he saw this truck driver, Elvis, who he had the moves.
Right.
The sexual moves of Elvis,
right.
famously. He's just copying black people. That's all he's doing. The voice of the whole baritone voice. Elvis is just a white kid who wanted to be black. Yeah. And then he thought, I'm going to be rich with this guy. Yeah. And then as soon as he started, because Elvis started out copying music. Just straight up, just copying other people's music. He copied Chuck Berry's song with no, by the time Chuck Berry came out of prison, found out that Elvis was already famous and he's stealing his songs. Nobody's going to defend a black guy anyway at that stage. So Elvis became the highest. To this day, he's one of the most famous artists, right?
So can I say, real quick, going back to the previous question, because I mentioned there are two possible answers here. And one of them has to do with what Timothy and I spoke to. Timothy, Ras Temari gentleman, in the last episode that we did 2 days ago. He was saying that a lot of black artists, like a lot of dictators from Latin America or anybody who challenges they happen to go down in a plane crash, Otis Redding, or they happen to get shot in their 20s or...
you're right, actually. No, Jay-Z's not #1. He's #2 with 14.
Who's #1?
The Beatles, with 19 albums.
Oh, I guess they were comparing him to solo artists.
Ah, yeah.
Of the solo artists, yeah. Because when he got to 11, I think he already had #4. He was
11 is Barbra Streisand.
Okay. Well, there you go. He tied Barbra Streisand. Take that, Barbra Streisand. Jay-Z versus Barbra Streisand.
You can name a Barbra Streisand album.
No, I cannot, and it amazes me that people listen to it. Anyway, but different strokes. But so one thing that Timothy and I mentioned when we were talking was a lot of young black artists, singers, the Sam Cooks, and they die under mysterious circumstances. There's got to be something to this. The plane accidents, the shootings, the whatever, under mysterious circumstances. And his argument was, and I know he's sort of...
I would say there's conspiracy, though.
Right, I was about to say, he's sort of a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
But, you see enough of a conspiracy, you see enough of a theory being played out, even if it seems outlandish. I'm just saying there might be something that at least some of these people are being killed by certain groups who are afraid that this person is becoming a little too powerful, that he's escaping our control. Someone like Tupac, especially.
That's why I don't think that the reason I don't think there's no conspiracy there is that all these black artists, from Sam Cooke to Tupac, the reason they could not possibly have been killed by the white man is that...
I didn't say the white man.
No, what I mean is the man. Or
right, the man.
Is that we forget that these are not independent artists selling their songs on their websites. These are a piece of the fucking machine.
Right, so it's counterproductive to them.
It's absolutely counterproductive. The reason here's the thing, they made them famous.
But see, the man or the white man is not a monolith. I don't think that who killed them would ever be somebody who was profiting off of their art. Because that makes no sense, unless they were profiting in the short term. Because it is true that Aaliyah, for instance, when she went down in a plane accident, maybe she's another one. Her record.
Not talented enough to be.
I think Aaliyah was great, and I really don't like when people say bad things about Aaliyah.
No, I'm not saying a bad thing. I'm saying is she talented enough to change the fucking landscape?
So yes. So I love Aaliyah. So all I'm saying is. I don't mean it sexually. But I'm just okay. So her record sales tripled. So if somebody is speculating off of the record sales going up and down, at least in the short term, it might make sense for them to be involved in a plot. But more importantly, if somebody sees them as a threat, as a voice, or as a rallying point, because entertainers, especially among black people, that's the most viable way to develop a real platform. And all I'm saying is, what Timothy was saying seemed to make a lot of sense to me.
If 2 Chainz fucking got killed in the plane crash, then he would have been. Possibly it's a conspiracy. 2 Chainz was a genius. You know what I mean? Like people.
Is 2 Chainz a genius?
No, absolutely. The reason
is
I said 2 Chainz.
Did he die?
The reason I said 2 Chainz is anybody. As soon as they die, they become significant.
Yes, but I would say that the reason Tupac was not 2 Chainz before he died.
No,
Tupac was already
right. So I don't think it's the man that killed him.
I didn't say it was the man. I never used
those
words.
Too close to the sun.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying that. For certain people, certain kinds of people with background who have a platform, who suddenly start amassing power, do have... Here's the other thing. It's never the 2 Chainz type of rapper. It's not, Busta Rhymes doesn't get killed.
Type of rapper that gets killed.
But are there...
recently there was what do you call, I don't know how to pronounce
it. The Triple X guy.
Yeah, Triple X.
Yeah. Something. See, I can't comment on it.
Yeah, there you go.
What was that?
XX-Tenacious?
XX-Tenacious, yes.
There you go. Producer chiming in.
So, are you a fan of his music?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can hear you. You're far from the mic.
No, cool. we have a fan of XX-Tenacious.
Yeah, I listen to his music. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of his music?
Like, I don't listen to all of it, but some of it is good.
Do you think he was murdered?
Well, he was murdered.
Yeah.
No. I mean, he was murdered. Do you think there was a conspiracy? Do you think they wanted him killed?
If there's more than one person, it's a conspiracy.
Absolutely.
Right.
Do you think there was a plan, a long-term plan, where it's just it's just one of those things?
Or maybe he's in the Bermuda Triangle right now, chilling off of the royalties from his... That's the other thing. When people say people fake their death, there is motive for that because your sales go up. But
absolutely.
Is he... tell us, because neither of us know, right? Is he a talented writer in a sort of like a conscious...
I know he's a huge fan of Kurt Cobain, speaking of.
Well, there you go. Is he like somebody who writes intelligent or socially conscious music, or is he more like a commercial, just club hit kind of guy?
I think it's more like commercial.
Oh, okay.
Well, there you go. So it's more club type of...
Well, see, some people do die in gangbangs. I mean, it probably was a gangbang situation. But I'm just saying,
was
like...
he killed in a gangbang? It's just gangsters kill him? Or...
Probably, yeah. I think so.
Probably.
I remember hearing
like
about
gangster to me.
Look. Some of the people who have died from the hip hop community under mysterious circumstances. There was Nipsey Hussle. There was Tupac. There's somebody named Big L. You ever listen to Big L?
No.
From New York.
Big Al.
Big L.
L.
Not Big Al. Not Weird Al. Big L. Big L with the glasses.
You know Big L?
Big L is one of the more talented. I mean, even Eminem. A lot of the people from that tradition of like real good lyrical content. Mm-hmm. Big L is one of the best.
Where is he from? 90s?
Yeah, and he's from New York, and he was shot in like a street beef, shot in the head kind of thing.
Lovely.
A lot of the more like hip hop type people are like, Big L was one of the most brilliant writers, and nobody understands how he was killed. Then there's Otis Redding, then there's Sam Cooke, then there's, all I'm saying is, where there's smoke, there's fire. Some interest, I'm not saying it's the man, I'm not saying it's some international conspiracy, but some interest that sees, I mean, somebody killed Dr. King, right? Somebody killed him.
That's a different.
Somebody
That's a
killed
different conversation. These are political figures. That's a different conversation. I'm not saying conspiracy theories don't exist. I'm saying when you talk about Sam Cooke getting killed in a hotel room, in a hallway, running butt naked.
Under mysterious circumstances. It didn't really add up.
Most murders are, if there's drugs involved and musicians are involved, it's going to be mysterious.
I got you.
Because there's a lot of drunkenness and running around naked going on.
I got you. Listen, I'm not saying that any one of these was a conspiracy or was a this or was that.
Died
right?
tonight, it's going to be really mysterious.
Okay. Again, I'm not saying that every single one of these has to be placed in one category or another. I'm saying that a pattern emerges at some point.
Pattern of what?
We're
finding a pattern where it doesn't exist. That's what I'm thinking.
Hold on. I'll tell you what the pattern is. Because I know a lot of people roll their eyes at conspiracy theorists, and my thing is usually they're full of it.
Absolutely.
But if there's a pattern that emerges, the pattern is usually young black artists, and we know that for young black people, the sole means of really acquiring a platform traditionally is through arts and entertainment, if not politics later. Young black artists very often die under mysterious circumstances that either involve assassination, a la just like Medgar Evers was killed around the same age. Medgar Evers is a civil rights leader. As Tupac was killed.
That's not the same conversation.
I don't know. I'm saying. I'm comparing Medgar Evers, Dr. King, Malcolm X, etc. Those killings.
Different conversation.
Hold on, but I'm comparing the two.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So those kinds of political killings were around the same age, and then there's a lot of people who die in plane accidents. A lot of people, from Aaliyah to Otis Redding. Now, I'm not saying one of these.
No, but what you need to remember is
statistics.
Yeah, exactly. When we're talking about plane accidents, generally musicians, how they travel way more often on planes than anybody else.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
And then another statistic we need to remember is when black artists die, right? We need to remember how many of them didn't die.
Right.
No, not just that, but the general statistic of non-famous black people murder rates, right? And then the idea, not just famous people, but what is the murder rate of, let's say, a successful black man? Not a successful black man that moved to the suburbs, but a successful black man who bases his career on being street-wise, right?
I don't mean
street smart. You know what I mean?
I don't mean to overstate. I don't mean to overstate the case, right? I understand what you're saying.
So I think statistics-wise, I don't think there's conspiracy there, because if you ask me, a lot of more rappers survive than I expected. Honestly,
compared to most young black men.
Considering their career, they literally base their career off the idea of gangster rap. Is literally about how, because it's not just a show. It's not a show. They have to prove it. These guys have to be Jay-Z has to park his car in the middle of a dangerous neighborhood. Yeah, because he can't be some sort of he can't put on a show on music videos and then be chicken shit.
Otherwise, he loses his street cred.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Street cred is very important for rappers,
you.
right? So the idea that when I'm trying to prove my street cred, because it's tied with my success, doesn't that drastically increase my chance of murder?
I get what you're saying. Listen, I told you right up front that there are other motivations for killing young black men besides the fact that they're a danger to the power structure. I'm just saying there seems to be.
I don't think they moved the power structure at all.
That's what I'm saying. It seems to be something that happens somewhat persistently that I think there might be some legitimacy to it, but I can't prove it. So I think we can get off.
I don't think you have a strong enough voice to affect the structure, because if they can't talk about how. There's another thing that bothers me about rap is how they keep playing into the role they're given. It's like wrestling.
Right.
Rap is very much like wrestling, where the audience, everybody kind of knows it's fake, but you decide to forget, right?
Sure.
And they're playing a role, and they have to keep in that role every time, on interviews, on real life. Every time when they go to a club, they have to play the gangster, even though they're not even from there. Even though Ice Cube might not actually be a real gangster, then he all of a sudden has to be a gangster. You know what I mean? If he goes to a club, he's famous, and he's famous as a gangster rapper. So it's like wrestling, where they're not allowed to turn off their roles.
I understand what you're saying.
But the problem is, what annoys me is that there's not enough, as artists, I would have expected there would be a lot more rappers, or at least a lot more black artists now, Because here's where hip hop failed the black community. Because back in the day, hip hop, black music had its own thing where it kind of separated from what the expectation of the label or whatever, and they could kind of create their own thing, even if it's an underground. Funk did that, right? Jazz used to do that, where it's their own thing. The corporations could commercialize it, but it's their own thing.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But hip hop, they're drawn into the lure of money and fame, where no rapper, no matter how gangster they seem or how tame they seem, seems to actually openly say in their music and also how this is not really who they are, and the fact that their fans are not really black people. Lil Wayne is the only one I heard say in an interview where they asked him about race stuff, and he said, most of my concerts, I don't see a single black man. I don't see a single black man in most of my concerts. It's literally entirely white, so don't ask me about race shit. I cannot speak for them. I think I talk about street stuff, and then I go on stage, and it's literally white kids and white girls
He's also said,
losing their shit.
He's also said that he's never been the victim of racism, and that might be because he was famous, not just and popular as a black guy, but he's been famous and popular as a black guy since he was about 15, 16 years old.
He's very
he came up
young.
with Cash Money Millionaires about
absolutely,
20 years ago. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying everything. Absolutely, like you said, he's famous since he was young, but at the same time, I think he speaks the truth in the sense that no rapper is willing to admit, no matter who he is, from Kanye to Tupac, is that rappers at the end of the day on most of their concerts, even though they pretend it's by blacks for blacks, it's mostly.
I think everybody knows that. I mean, you're right, but everybody.
Not instinctive. No, not necessarily. People actually truly believe that these guys speak for them. Rappers are a black thing. People believe that. You know what I mean?
Well, in a
black
sense they
fans
are, but
truly feel. I mean, if you ask, and not just in Africa, I mean, I'm sure in America also, Jay-Z fans actually think Jay-Z's a black man who represents New York.
well, he is. But you're saying that
he is,
audience determines authorial intent?
Absolutely,
Audience, entirely.
Not entirely, but what I was trying to say is that I expected a bit more of a bit more insight from the artists themselves about how they're sick of this shit.
I got what you're saying.
They
completely
should be
agree.
sick
Yeah,
of this
I
shit. A rapper
completely
should
agree.
say, as a rapper speaking about the streets, he should, because I think that's how most of us would react.
That's what Tupac
If
would
you
say.
go on stage and then you see just white people, city after city, you'd say, my next
And
song would
that's
be
what
about what the
Tupac
fuck
would
is
say.
happening.
And that's what Tupac would say. And that's also what Marvin Gaye would say. What's going on? Before he got shot by his father. Right, but before I don't mean to go back to conspiracy theory, but you know, not everybody who's a dickly father is going to kill their son, right? I'm just saying, a lot of people who seem like a challenge, to the system, end up dying under mysterious circumstances at an untimely. And I'm not saying
it's not that mysterious though. With Marvin Gaye, it's not that mysterious. What do you mean mysterious? Stop saying mysterious. Because Marvin Gaye, it's not mysterious. It's not mysterious. He gave his dad a gun. I don't know why. Because his dad is severely abusive, right? Ever since he was a kid, he used to beat the shit out of him. Right. And then, his mother is a witness. I don't know how that's mysterious. He beat the shit out of him because Marvin Gaye was a boxer. He gave his dad a gun. Here's what happened. He gave his dad a gun, who's abusive, and then he went back next Christmas, beat up his dad, and then went back to sleep. And then his dad came in and shot the shit out of him. That's what happened.
I was making a reference back to that whole conspiracy thing in a somewhat humorous sense. I was trying to relitigate that little argument. But okay, so I was trying to get that deeply into it in the first place. I just find it interesting. But Bob Dylan, you were talking about rappers playing into a type, or rappers playing into the role, right? It's a beautiful way to put it. Like an actor playing a character. Bob Dylan was set up with a role that was to be the disruptive guy in the power structure. This is a big part of the Scorsese documentary, No Direction Home, which I highly recommend, about Bob Dylan. It's great. It's a 2-part documentary. I'll get back to something from that documentary in a second. But he was set up with a role of, you have to play into this sort of the bard, the poet for social and political change. And he kind of didn't accept. He felt that he was being co-opted for somebody else's political ends, even if he shared what those the political goals, as Joan Baez did. Joan Baez would say, like, you know, every time I go to a die-in or a sit-in or a this-in or a that-in, you know, some hippie radical thing, they always ask, is Bob coming? And she goes, he never comes. What are you talking about? Bob never comes. He's not into this kind of thing.
Double meaning when she says it.
No, come on. But like, she's saying, like, he's never involved or anything like that, and people always expect that of Bob, but Bob has never been into politics. He wrote songs that were sort of generally for the little guy, like for the downtrodden, but he never accepted lending his voice and lending his art to a political program. And honestly, for a guy who's cool and inscrutable and kind of above it all, and who's like very devoted to his art, of course Bob Dylan's not going to allow somebody to go up there. Also, he had too much power to be willing to lend himself in that way, the way that Joan Baez was. But it is interesting that Bob Dylan refuses to play the role the way the rapper refuses not to play the role, right? Like he's supposed to be playing the role of challenging the power structure. At least that's what we come to expect of him, because he's a black person with a voice, with a platform, with talent. But that never seems to happen. Just as the white guy, or the Jewish guy from the Midwest, who's supposed to play the role of the disruptive one, he actually ends up refusing. It's the opposite refusal.
It depends, I guess, on the character you're playing, because I agree, they're both playing a role. Absolutely. I think musicians in general, this is what people forget, that musicians are actors in the theater of life. That's the difference.
Beautifully put.
You know what I mean? Because theater, an actor is an actor, and you'd have to be an absolute idiot not to know when you see him on the street that he's not an actual character, right?
I think of athletes the same way. Like athletes, the reason people love sports is that it's lore, it's storytelling
within that
is
context.
Actually real, and that it's not scripted.
But within that context, that's what's important.
Right.
You know
within
what I mean?
that context.
You have to, the same way with actors. You see an actor and he's playing a role, and let's say you play the villain. You see him on the street, and then you don't really. So there's that difference, right?
Right.
Musicians, the whole magic of musicians, I think, is that they're also actors. People don't know this, but they're absolutely actors. They play a certain role. Like you said, Bob Dylan, the rebel that stood against the man. But that's not really who he's getting paid by. Rage Against the Machine. The best example of this is Rage Against the Machine, which are
because they were corporate stooges, or because they were playing
not
for
just corporate
Sony.
stooges, but the whole point. These are people that study political science. These are not idiots. These are not some. They know
Tom Morello
exactly,
is a Harvard graduate.
And
the guitarist from
Rage Against the Machine. Exactly what he's talking about when he says he's against capitalism. In interviews, not just in music.
Right, he's a Marxist. He's a thinker.
He's against capitalism, and they're against. And then they thinkers. People associate them as thinkers, right? They're not just as thinkers, but they stand for something, which is anti-capitalist, anti the machine, anti the man, right?
Yeah.
But people forget every single album released by them is tied to a record label.
Do people forget that?
Absolutely forget that.
Do people forget that people criticize them for that all the time? That's part of their downfall.
No. It depends what people we're talking about, though.
No, everybody used to criticize Rage Against the Machine. They're sellouts. They play for a corporate. And what Tom Morello would say, I remember Tom because I was a big Rage Against the Machine fan early in high school. Rage Against the Machine changed my music listening season. I didn't listen to rock and roll until I was about 15, 16. And because there were these rappers who were interested in politics the way I was in history, the way I was in Marxism, the way I was, they allowed me to transition from listening to rap to suddenly appreciating the guitar riffs. And Tom Morello had these brilliant guitar riffs. And I'm not saying that they were the greatest artists or anything, but I defend them tooth and nail because they reached somebody like me using the tools. Their whole argument was, we want to use the corporate power structure. We want to use the machine as a platform. I mean, Sony in the end is not the belly of the beast or anything like that, right? They wanted to use the corporate structure well, I'll tell you to what end. To reach the average teenager, to give them an alternative that they otherwise are completely not exposed to. I mean, their politics were way more sophisticated than the average radical rock band with conscience.
Like
they
said,
understood.
I
mean, but even their videos were making references to the Zapatistas and to Sendero Luminoso.
Why did Sony pay for those videos?
Again, because they did not see them as a threat.
Because you need to remember, Sony paid for those videos.
Because they did not see them as a threat. They saw them as people who were able to sell albums, right? So they made money, they capitalized on it, and that's part of their understanding. Rage understood it, and Tom Morello understood it, and the Sony people understood it.
You actually think they stood for something, though?
Without question, and it bothers me that people don't realize it. Because the other point that I think
they think they stood for something.
Of course they think this is, but I think they did. Okay, but here's the other point that they would make. Tom Morello made this point effectively. He was like, those kids who criticize us for selling out, as opposed to the artists who never signed for corporate contracts, whatever. I mean, I've spoken to Marxists who said the same thing. I'm close with a friend who's a very active Marxist, right? He would walk around with a Nike T-shirt with the swoosh on. And people who grew up in the infantile left of college campuses in the United States would be like, Nike is a corporate. They start mouthing the stupid discourse of like, that's a corporate brand. How could you walk around? Nike is capitalizing, blah blah. And they have no idea what they're talking about, because in the grand scheme of things, it's not about a goddamn shoe company or any one or about Sony's profits or anything.
Yeah, it's not about.
It's about. It was with Rage Against the Machine. It was about using the platform. And the argument, just to finish off, the argument that Tom Morello would make was a lot of the kids making these arguments are typing furiously into onto laptops that their mommy and daddy at their corporate job bought for them, and they don't seem to understand that that's selling out too, right? So it's about using
but I'm saying
the machine
there's
as
a better
a
way to
platform.
do it.
What's the better way?
Where you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have Nine Inch Nails, which are not Marxist.
Not even close. No,
not even close.
Yeah,
they did way more than Rage
how
Against the
so?
Machine.
Nine Inch Nails.
Because Nine Inch Nails, I'm not sure if it's one or two, but at least one record label now. So they're directly related with the demise of at least one sort of sub-label of a big label, which is how, because the whole point of, Trent Reznor is one of those, like, he's a little unpredictable, and he's
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, he has that, because it's not about ideology with him, I think.
A friend of mine
He's
once worked for Trent Reznor.
Yeah.
I mean, he confirmed for me all the stories about Trent Reznor. You walk into his house. This is what I'm told, right? He has a giant blow up of a picture in which, like Britney Spears had been caught by a paparazzi with her legs crossed, and there was a shot of right. So he had that blown up on his wall. Like, Trent Reznor is a nut job.
He's a nut job.
eccentric.
Absolutely.
Okay. Zach De La Rocha and Tom Morello don't have
blown
blown up pictures of Britney Spears genitals on their walls. Like they have better things.
But what I
do.
mean is, have you heard the story about how Nine Inch Nails, after they got big? I'm not talking about the downward spiral. Way after that, they worked on a big album that cost a lot of money. Apparently, I don't know which album it was. I don't remember. But apparently, after they're done with it, and it cost a shit ton with the record label, he actually released it on the torrent pirate sites,
right?
And used to recommend his fans to just
right. I heard
it
about
get
that,
it for free.
Right,
and that actually contributed to, because it was a sub label. You know how you have big Universal, whatever, it was a sub label, and it's kind of part of his appeal, where he's unpredictable. My point is that that's the type of shit you'd expect.
What year was that?
Machine.
What year was that?
I think it's either early 2000s. It's either early 2000s or.
Because by the time Radiohead did something similar to that. I mean,
Radiohead didn't do that. Radiohead had
I know.
what
This
you
is
want.
similar. Right.
Radiohead did not fuck with the record label.
Right.
He fucked the
No,
record label.
I got you.
And that's awesome.
I got you.
Yeah.
But Radiohead did an alternative kind of thing.
Yeah.
The record label.
In Rainbow,
2007. Right.
King of Limbs.
Okay. Well, Rage Against the Machine broke up in 2001. Right. At a time when Napster had just emerged, like a year before.
Do you think they would have been part of that?
I have no idea. I'm not going to be
No,
counterfactual about.
I
Rage
know.
Against
But
the
my
Machine.
point is, everything they stand for seems like they're like rappers of the rock industry, where they're selling an ideal, a certain image, and their buyers are not who they pretend to be. You know what I mean?
I disagree. They're buyers, but again, you seem to think that everything is about the audience.
Absolutely.
The character of the audience.
No, I say an artist should adjust. If he's selling to the wrong artist, you should adjust.
But what if the artist is trying to influence the audience? This is an important question. That's what Rage Against the Machine is trying to do.
No,
They're trying to reach a broad audience to influence them.
Rage Against the Machine gets a certain audience in the first place. It's not like Rage Against the Machine is stealing audience from Britney Spears.
Not from Britney Spears.
They know that. They're not getting. In the first place, they're getting these wannabe Marxists, right? In the first place, that's the whole appeal of Rage Against the Machine.
Among others, the anarchist crowd in particular. A lot of anarchists rallied around, especially the song when he says, "I want you, will you tell me F you?" And
fuck you.
Right, that became an anarchist thing.
Absolutely, and it's like they know exactly who they're selling to from the get-go. Because try to think like a record label executive. Why would they sign Rage Against the Machine?
To reach the masses of anarchists out there.
No, not just anarchists, but to reach the teenagers who felt that we need
disaffected youth, right? A lot of white kids in suburbs who like those guitar riffs, or even someone like me who grew up around white kids in suburbs.
To feel like you're rebelling, but you're not.
Not to feel like you're rebelling. Not to feel like you're rebelling. I can tell you, as a fan of theirs, at an early age, right in their demographic, right around the time that they broke up, is when I became a fan of theirs. I did not feel that I was rebelling. I did not feel that I was rebelling.
That was the fan base, wasn't
it? No. I did not think that I was rebelling by listening to their music. Okay? That's delusional. I can only speak
But that's
for
the
myself.
majority. Because you
No,
need to remember
hold
that
on,
these
let
guys
me
are
finish.
major artists, right?
Let me finish.
These are not underground artists.
Yes, exactly. If they had been underground artists, they would have never reached a kid like me who had no connection to the underground
You already were
music
there.
scene.
Not the underground music scene, but the ideology of Marxism. You already
I wasn't
there.
already there. I wasn't already there.
They
I was
influenced-
not. Absolutely.
Somehow, the reason
Without
you
question.
actually consider Marxism is because of racism.
I did. First of all, I'm not a Marxist.
No,
but
no,
I
the
found
reason you
interest-
studied it
Hold on.
or understood
well,
it.
let me answer your
Yeah.
questions. Hold on, one at a time. Right.
Yeah.
So, what they were able to do was anybody, and there are a lot of people like this. I'm not exceptional in this way. Who grew up in the suburbs, teenagers, and there's a self-righteousness about this, and there's a teenage angst about this. Yeah. So anybody who had that. Who had that penchant or had that inkling, a band like Rage Against the Machine, what they were able to do was capture the kernel of disaffected youth in quite a few people, and quite a few young people in particular, and capture their desire for some kind of alternative to a completely corporatist. And of course, this was often presented by corporations, right? In Mighty Ducks 2, which was a very popular film from the 90s about hockey, starring Emilio Estevez, which is also a marketing scheme because the Mighty Ducks were owned by Disney, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks in the NHL. The villain, one of the villains in the story, is the marketing guy who wants to sell the Mighty Ducks as he wants to sell them as a corporate brand, or wants to establish corporate brands on them. And there are other examples of this. The way the corporations would MTV2 especially, would try to present themselves as anti-corporate or as an alternative to corporate when there was nothing more of a corporate than Viacom, right? I disagree with the idea that Rage Against the Machine was on there because it was always a superficial discussion of these things. That's how I can tell. There was always a superficial discussion of these things, whether it was in the Mighty Ducks or whether it was in Viacom and MTV. When it came to Rage Against the Machine, there was no superficiality of it. They had read these books. They were pushing these books. They would, in their albums, they would set up a whole bunch of websites. And I, as a 15-year-old, started subscribing to the websites that they would put there. One of them was called Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. It was a left-wing media organization that was holding the Fox News and the corporate media accountable. I saw it. It said Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting at fair.org, fair.org. And I went and I visited their website and I got involved.
Yeah.
Right? They understood that they could reach a lot of people just by having books, Anarchist Cookbook and Gramsci and all that on their albums, just by having certain images. Hey, go find out what Sendero Luminoso is. Here's a video that is a smorgasbord, and their videos are really brilliant also. But of all this revolutionary history. And then here are some websites of some alternative groups, of some left-wing groups out there. I can speak as somebody who, I wasn't radical or anything before that. I'm not radical now. Yeah. But at least I was exposed. I became a little more conscious. No, I'm not saying that I rebelled or anything like that. I'm not glorifying myself, nor do I think they glorify themselves. I think what they were doing was saying, here's an opportunity to carve out a little bit of resistance and show others a way of carving out a little bit of resistance within the power structure without ever fooling ourselves into believing
would you say it was effective in any way?
that we are somehow going to bring down as a
Not bring
rock
down.
down is going to bring down. Okay, exactly.
So first we need to agree that there is no bringing down capitalism.
We agree. Okay, we agree.
Capitalism, there is no bringing down capitalism.
Certainly not for musicians with guitars.
Bringing
and
down
drums are gonna
capitalism
okay.
is as hard as bringing down Christianity during the Roman Catholic era, the Middle Ages.
Right. Christian tribalism. Yeah. No, I agree. Okay, so let's do it.
So here's the thing: there is no way to bring it down. There's no question about it, right?
Right.
But my point is that these guys, they're educated people, and they're fully aware that there's no way to bring it down, right? But it offered a promise of sort of revolution. They promised what kids in the 60s used to have, but then it felt realistic. Artists were not disingenuous back then. When they actually had Woodstock, and they truly felt with the hippie movement that some change truly could come from it, right? There was no sense of dishonesty about it when artists really felt.
It was a different time, right? That change was actually possible.
Absolutely, change was possible,
right?
And the artists felt it, and the audience felt it,
right.
And that's why the whole world kind of united, not including our country, but the whole world, the Western world, and all that united with the whole hippie movement, feeling that some change could come, right? This is why I say disingenuous is not just because they signed to a record label, right? These guys are
selling some sort of illusion to suburban kids that they know full and well. It's the same way when let's say I'm I make an awesome movie about the idea of the downfall of capitalism with no realistic base to it. You know what I mean?
I like that idea.
You know, what I mean is I know that it's not realistic, but I know that kids who want to change the world, because kids always want to change the world, right? Kids always fucking want to change the world if they're not, hungry or like, if they don't have any bigger problems.
Right.
Like suburban kids always want to change the world, and if I make a movie about we can do it, and then sell tickets, and my entire goal was to sell tickets for this movie, to make money, and then tell them it's just possible, keep going. I don't know how to do it, but fucking go at it. That I feel that they're not really practicing what they preach at all. They don't believe in it. They know it's impossible to bring it down. All they're doing is just being very leftist. I don't know how they're different from any other leftist artist. It's not.
Name another leftist artist. I'll tell you how they're different from them right now.
Leftist, extremely leftist artist.
Yeah. Name another example of somebody who was doing something like
Aaron Sorkin, but he's not Marxist.
What?
Aaron Sorkin, but he's not Marxist. But the whole what I mean is Aaron Sorkin is also about how there's something deeply wrong with the system, and we can be better. That's the whole point, right?
I mean, that's true of John Grisham and about half of all of the writers.
John Grisham is small time. What I mean is, it's not
Sorkin.
Because Sorkin is about how. Because last time we were talking about the newsroom, right?
Yeah.
The idea that America can be better.
Oh my God, that was one of the worst TV shows.
That's Rage Against the Machine. I think no. Here's the thing, because they're not providing a solution. They're not providing a solution either. Now, I'm not saying it's the same solution that they're promising.
Guitar players and rock artists should not be expected to present a solution. At the most, to awake people's consciousness, which I appreciate.
But here's the thing, I really think that Rage Against the Machine fans from the 90s and 2000s, they're just normal corporate people that don't really. It's not like you're.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nobody's saying. They never said that they had managed to foment rebellion in the United States.
But that's the promise, isn't it? Though?
No, it's
not. That's what kids think. That's what kids think when they listen to Renegades.
Okay, I don't know which. I don't know which Rage Against the Machine listeners.
Rage Against the Machine is.
I never, as a very big avid fan in that demographic of the right after they broke up, into early 2000s to early 2000s to mid 2000s, I was a big Rage Against the Machine fan. They changed my listening patterns. They introduced me to rock music, and they made me They made me aware of certain websites, of certain books out there, of certain opportunities to contribute to the community. I never sat there and thought that I was going to manage to affect change, but at least
you're a typical Rage Against the Machine fan?
Yes, at least yes. In spite of my skin color, but aside from that,
no,
every other aspect.
Typical in the sense. No, I don't mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
What I mean is
demographically.
No. Do you think typical Rage Against the Machine's fans, all they got from it was that they got introduced to rock music, and then
most of them already were into rock music.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I would say
they thought they were listening to an anti-establishment band.
They are an anti-establishment band. Just because you are anti-establishment doesn't mean you have to literally start the Soviet Union.
What establishment were they against? That's what I'm asking. If you still buy their fucking albums at Walmart, then what the hell's the point?
Well, again, I mean, the
what establishment are they against? That's my question.
I'll answer your question. The cost-benefit analysis that they're coming up with this is, on the one hand, yes, Sony, which is just one group. Listen, the more avidly leftist a group is, the less they are put off by, oh my God, we're contributing to corporate profits. Do you really think that Sony's profits every few years from the release of Rage Against the Machine album is really significant in the grand scheme of things? Okay, whatever. One corporation made a little bit of money. In a corporate-driven economy, that corporation is going to find ways to make money anyway.
They were one of the biggest bands.
It's not their contribution to corporate profits is completely negligible and is totally not pertinent.
They're one of the biggest bands. You know that, right?
Whatever. I'm pretty sure Sony would have made money without them or with them. And Sony is just
say that about any of their products. Together they count, don't they?
And Sony is a speck of dust in there. Here's the other way to put it. Flip side of what you just said. Together, if a lot more artists were inspired in the long run by Rage Against the Machine, even if they didn't affect major change, they could at least create a discussion or change the consciousness. This is the same argument I make in defense of Bernie Sanders. People say about Bernie Sanders, well, he hasn't passed any legislation. You know Bernie Sanders, Jewish American, Democratic politician. He hasn't passed any legislation. He's pie in the sky guy. right? He wants this and he wants that. He lost both times. He lost both times. The Democratic establishment shut him out. It was a pipe dream, whatever. I'm like, what's better to complete? Because what's the alternative? There's no perfect situation in life. What's better for Rage Against the Machine to have done love songs, for Bernie Sanders to have been brought into the modern stuff? At least Bernie Sanders, much more so than Rage Against the Machine, of course, he's a politician. Bernie Sanders changed the discussion. Suddenly became
don't equate them. Don't equate them.
But compared to
I think
most,
those are different. I think those are very different things.
But
I think Bernie Sanders
think,
actually does believe what he preaches.
Oh, I think the Rage Against the Machine does too. Come on, you
No,
think
in
they're
their
making it
private
up?
life, in their
You think they
maybe
don't believe it?
in their private life, sure.
You think they're just
Not even
paddling
their private
the?
life. Fuck their private life. Listen, even in their private life, they do not.
Can we avoid the cursing also?
What's the curse? There's no. Is there?
No, but
What do you call it?
I just want to avoid the cursing as much.
I mean, it's
Once in a while. Once in a while.
like the
it's one
Henry
thing,
Hill
but no, it
interview.
became right, exactly. The Henry Hill interview, which everybody should watch. If you've seen Goodfellas, watch the Henry Hill 2002 drunk interview. It's Henry Hill 2002 drunk. Howard TV, Howard Stern.
Absolutely.
It's a mesmerizing piece
awesome.
of interview, which I was telling Kidus as a filmmaker and a fan of Goodfellas.
You'll hate Stern after that, though.
I still love Stern,
Yeah.
but I get what you're
But
saying.
in this case, I'm Henry Hill.
But see, your critique of Stern is like your critique of Rage Against the Machine. What
the fuck? I'm sorry.
Stop with the cursing.
I'm sorry.
Okay, listen. I think what I'm saying is you're creating a false dichotomy that either somebody should affect. Hold on. Either somebody should affect significant change in their actions, or they should play into. Or they should play into the corporate miasma that everybody else goes. Maybe a fair way, a good way for an individual to go about their business and live their life is to try to make a few more people conscious, try to change the discussion in some way, try to show the way for somebody, and then go into their grave knowing that they tried. Right, as opposed I'm either I'm Vladimir Lenin and I've changed the course of history, or I'm a corporate stooge because there's nothing in between.
No, it's not. It doesn't have to be such a dichotomy. Like you said, I don't think it's about the results. I think it's about. I mean, ultimately, it's about results. It's not about the how.
No, I get what you're saying.
But the result doesn't necessarily need to be turning America into the Soviet Union.
Right.
But when I listen to Rage Against the Machine, when you see white kids with their headphones and whatever the fuck, right? You know, listening to whatever the fudge, listening to Rage Against the Machine is the same as when you see a woman on using her iPad and with stickers that say down with capitalism, in some Starbucks, whatever. It's that's the magic of capitalism, though. At the end of the day, capitalism is the type of thing that Che Guevara, which is so anti-establishment, right? Capitalism is the thing that sells you Che Guevara T-shirts. Capitalism is the thing that sells you anti-capitalist T-shirts. It's slippery and it kind of comes in many ways, and I think the only way to kind of actually fight it is capitalism. The only way to describe capitalism is that it's a middleman, right? On the way Louis C.K. sells his comedy series on his website, which he owns, to his fans. That's it, right? So, as Rage Against the Machine were the biggest artists after their first album, they were huge. They're huge. They had no. They could have pulled radio. I'm not saying Radiohead did what they should have done, because Radio is pay what you want, even though they were.
No, I got what you're saying. Yeah.
But I think Rage Against the Machine, they had enough clout and fame to go direct to their fans.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that could have led a bunch of copycats, or a bunch of the next generation of rock stars or rappers, because Rage Against the Machine is a mixture of both, right? They're right in the middle of rap and rock.
Right.
I think they could have influenced at least a sense of.
Is it fair to say getting off
audience.
the politics? Because I think we've discussed this one to death. Really, we're beating the dead horse. But so the rock rap fusion movement, the rap metal fusion movement, which was to bring together these two different demographics, which dominated the 2000s with MTV. Right around the time that I got off popular music, and I can't really comment too pointedly or too knowledgeably on what happens after that. The rap metal sort of fusion movement, it goes back to the 80s with certain individual attempts. What was the one that goes, is it Fear No More, or what's it called?
Faith No More?
Faith No More. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. With Mike Patton.
Yeah, but you know the song that they do. Faith No More had some song that had that like rap metal, and then there was Walk This Way, and then there was some song that Public Enemy did in the late 80s, early 90s. There was kind of a run-up where they were seeing the success of these singles where rap and metal, Aerosmith and Run DMC, they
I
come
think
together.
those are the labels
And then-
kind of forcing them together.
Right, but it was working. They saw that they were selling a lot because they're bringing it together. And then in the 90s, it took off. By the late 90s, it became a thing, right? With Limp Bizkit and Korn and a handful of other, eventually Linkin Park, right? New metal with rap influences, or with a rapper somehow thrown, or with a DJ somehow thrown into it, right?
Rage Against the
Even not even metal, like mellow sort of hallucinogenic rock. Like I hate this band, but you remember Incubus?
Yeah,
they had a DJ. They had a DJ. They threw in a DJ, and he would do these little scratches, kind of thing. Yeah. And it was silly as hell. But everybody was doing this to bring in these. That was, and MTV realized this is the commercial thing. But what's the first? But what is the first band? Well, I don't know about that. I mean, some people locate the death of rock in the '70s, right? And I think that's
no. I mean, that was the death of mainstream rock. That's when it kind of started leaving.
I don't know that that's the only event, but maybe that's.
No, I don't mean that's the cause, but it could be.
It's a signal.
It could be a symptom of it. But that's when it started dying off.
Right, I got you. But Rage Against the Machine is really the first of those bands. Like not a single project of Walk This Way, Talk This Way between Aerosmith and Run DMC. Not collaboration for one big hit because everybody knows that you're bringing together the white kids and the black kids, or the rap kids and the rock kids. But ultimately, the first band that actually made from a musical standpoint. Yeah. I don't just like Rage Against the Machine from a political standpoint. People usually divide it into two. Do you like their lyrics because of the politics?
No, I agree. It's a good band.
It's beyond that. It's a good band. It's an incredibly innovative band because they actually found
their politics, but they have a good band.
In the intersection of rap and rock, that there was a musical logic to it that a lot of people sort of imitated for commercial reasons. But I'm sorry, musically, Limp Bizkit, Korn, Linkin Park, whatever, none of them hold a candle to Rage Against the Machine. And that's because music, this gets back to the point that I wanted to make the whole time. When I said that I study poetry, or as a literature student, and they would always say, form and content are the same thing. A poem must not mean, but be, right? Rage Against the Machine, the same intelligence, the same perceptive capability, the same artistic credentials or credibility that went into them taking on using a corporate platform to send out an anti-corporate and resistance message is also what allowed them to be creative or original enough to actually do the rap metal thing in a way that nobody had done before consistently and no one has done since.
I don't know if they were the first rap rock band. I don't think so. I can't recall anyone.
Good one. Influential one.
Yeah, influential. That's what I mean. Like big ones.
They came out in the early 93, I think, is their first album.
No.
Yeah, the self-titled album is from 93, I think.
Their biggest one, not their biggest one, but they were popular since their first album, right?
Right. They're still their most acclaimed one.
Yeah.
And that's the one with Bomb Track. I think it's 93. Yeah. Latest 94, yeah. Because then they had Evil Empire.
I thought they were late 90s.
They did. No. They had already done 2 albums. But Evil Empire was 94, 95, maybe 96, and that's their second album. And then their third album, I'm pretty sure, was Battle of Los Angeles, and then they had Renegades, which was a cover album. I might be forgetting an album somewhere in there, but their first album is the self-titled one. Yeah. Self-titled one, 93, 94, yeah. So anyway.
Still, I mean, not to get back into their politics, but interesting music, definitely. Interesting, but the reason I say interesting is that still about their biggest claim to fame is their concepts. It brings us back to what we said earlier. They're a lyrical band, or at least they're a conceptual band. Would they have been as famous if you don't understand what the fuck you're talking about? What they're talking about?
I've given up on telling you not to curse. No, but they would not be as famous. I would imagine that if they were better if they weren't as good musically, they would still have a role in the sort of conscious hip hop community. But I'm just guessing. These are counterfactuals.
Famous in the hip hop community or the rock community?
I think in the hip hop community, because it would be lyrically driven. But if they were just as good musically and not as good politically or lyrically, if they didn't have that kind of controversial content, they would still be. I mean, Tom Morello's a freaking amazing guitarist, right? Like the rhythms. I know a lot of guitarists who don't like him because they would say it's too repetitive. Super repetitive.
That's not the problem.
Like it's like sort of like
riff. It's a riff.
It's a riff, but it's rhythmic. This is the thing that a lot of guitar players like. This is the argument I would get to with like white guitar players who would be like, yeah, he's good technically, but like it's over and over the same thing. And I'm like, that's because exactly metal fans. And I was like, that's because you're used to metal is like jazz, in that it's about going in a lot of different directions.
Metal's like white jazz.
Right. It's like instrumentalists who are really placing the instrument and the different riffs and the different directions that the instrument can go in at the center of everything. The Rage Against the Machine take was to take that metal riff and to place it within the more rhythmic, more melodic. You know what I mean? Like the structures of something like hip hop, of something. Yeah, because other music is really about rhythm, and most people who really study music, well, you'll ask them, what's more important, rhythm or melody? They'll go rhythm, 100% every time. Rhythm. Yeah, rhythm is more important. It's not about melody, it's about rhythm. Because you can have a song that's rhythm. Radiohead is another example of this. Radiohead, as great as some of their melodies, their dissonance, their textures, the vocals, or whatever, what do they always have? In every great song that they've had like 50 great songs at this point. Yeah. Greatest band ever, in my opinion. What do they always have? Very, very non-traditional intricate rhythm. Yeah. Specifically rhythm, right? They do it better than anybody, right? And some people don't realize it because rhythm is sort of in the background. Yeah. But your drummer sucks or your bassist sucks, you don't have a rock band. No. Your guitar player sucks and you might have Nirvana. Right? Like, so... like a guitar, that's the bells and whistles are exactly. But the bells and whistles are wonderful and everything. Yeah. But you have rhythm, you have music. You don't have rhythm, you don't have music.
Rock and roll is all about the backbeat. I don't know who's it's not the exact quote, but I think it's maybe Chuck Berry or I think he has a lyric in a song with us where he says it's a backbeat, you can't lose it.
Right.
Rock and roll is about that backbeat, which rock and roll music never had before rock and roll. Rock and roll was like, because
it's the song. It's got to be rock and roll music. Any old time you use it. It's got to be rock music. If you want to dance with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, that one.
So rock and roll, I think, because it's so hard to define. If people ask you, because hip hop, I think, is way easier to define. Any other genre might be easier to define than rock music, because rock is so expansive.
But it's also a straight 4/4 as far as the rhythm. It's the most rhythmically simple.
If you say rock and roll, yeah. But rock music.
Well, because it's gone in different directions. But the foundations
But you know rock music when you hear it, right?
But the foundations of the foundations of hip hop and of jazz are syncopation, right? The breakbeat in hip hop, dum 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 dum. Right. The different syncopations. Rock music is very straightforward.
The rock and roll.
I used to play rock drum. Yeah, I used to play a rock drummer. And I have no musical talent. I have no interest in playing music, and I could play a basic rock drum because it was just the most simple. It was just about
exactly.
It was about being a machine. Machine like exactly.
With a certain drag, I think.
Is it fair to say though, if we get back to the racial conversation real quick, is it fair to say that you can anticipate 30, 40, 50 years from now? I certainly can. That they will point to black kids, will listen to rap and go, "Are you trying to be white?" With your baggy jeans and your chains, that's white culture. After they've stolen it, and again, I don't hate white people, but we talked about this with Timothy. We don't hate we don't hate white people. They're people like anybody else. But there is an irony to the dynamic of every time we take what's yours, we then shame you for still appreciating something that we've taken from you, right? Or we impose it on you, and we change the icons. We change the icons from black figures to white figures, and tell you that Mary and Jesus are white Italians when they were really based on Isis and Horus and Osiris, who were black figures from Black Egypt.
Or do you think the coolness factor, or at least the creativity for culture, is inherent to the point that it will always be there? Or do you think that it will get to a stage where Ustad completely, and because currently since the beginning since the beginning we can say culture where white America kind of started getting its own culture. America started getting its own culture with black people, right? You know what I mean? Like it's not just early stage blues and all that, and they got this whole new thing where they got their music and blues with country became rock and roll, and even the way they dressed, the way they talked became its own thing. So black people have always kind of created what's cool. There's other influences as well. Getting to this day, since the 20s, where blues and jazz has been created by the slaves, and then you have rock and roll, and then you have funk, and then you have punk, and then you have hip hop, and then to this day you have all types of influence coming from the black community, right? So do you think 100 years from now, so that the culture of America will always stem from the black community?
Well, do you want to take this one? You sure? Okay. I think that we have this thing, and again, I'm gonna sound racist here, but at some point I don't care. So I'm also gonna sound like a virtue signal when it comes to women. And I have this theory that I've developed because I've seen this with so many interpersonal interactions, and I point to the Eazy-E Jerry Heller interactions. It's not because it's a black guy and a Jew. It's just Eazy-E and Jerry Heller, where Jerry Heller manipulates Eazy-E into believing that Eazy-E needs Jerry. Yeah. He's an older white guy with some power. But you find out when they go separate ways, if Eazy realizes that Jerry took advantage of him, that it was Jerry who needed Eazy. Yeah. I've seen that interaction. We've talked about this. I've seen that interaction a million times, right? Especially when it comes to identity groups. The weak prey on the strong. And they do so consistently, persistently, over the course of many years. So
white are the weak, as you say.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into why, but I'm sorry. I think of white people as
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think of white people as not just physically, but in general, as far as the resources that no fault of their own of Europe relative to others. Yeah, as far as the lack of creativity, originality. I don't know. I sound terrible saying this. I really don't mean any offense to any white person, but I'm sorry. I think of black people as stronger, as more capable, as more original, as just therefore white people have no choice but to convince psychologically black people that they are weaker in order to take advantage of them. I'm sorry. I know it sounds this way. No, I'll add this. Absolutely. I'll say this about women and men. Most people believe that because men typically, not always, physically are stronger than women, that and in terms of having more prowess, that means that men are stronger than women. That is not true. Women are stronger than men. Yeah. Women's bodies are made to endure what men cannot begin to endure. Biologically, women are stronger than men. Psychologically, women are stronger than men. Socially, women are stronger than men. Communication-wise, women are stronger than men. Sexism. It sounds like it, but it's...
Do you agree with what you say?
Don't put her on the spot. Listen, let me make this point, right? So, the reason I say this is...
reverse sexism is just sex.
Yeah, okay, fine. Call it what you want.
That's sexism, but the fact that I said
women have control over sexuality. Over women are the brakes, whereas men are the accelerator, generally, for whatever reason.
Generally.
Women are mature faster, generally. Women are better communicators, generally. Yes, without question. Yeah. Physically and otherwise. Socially and otherwise. Women... their endurance is much more important than prowess, right? Because a woman, even if she has, because the ability, for instance, to lift weights, a woman, even if she has disadvantages in developing that, a woman, if she wants to become a bodybuilder, can out-muscle.
Is it because there are minorities that have?
There are women who are physically.
Is it because they have to prove themselves though?
There are women who are more physically capable of lifting weights.
I'm not talking about them.
Or winning an arm.
My question is: are women stronger because they have to be? The same way black Americans are.
I would say
more creative and stronger.
Men act, posture as if they're stronger because they have to.
You think it's a biological thing or it's sociological?
I think overall, in general, I'm generalizing, of course. Yeah. Women are the ones, because a man, as I was saying, a woman can develop the ability to lift weights and become muscular, even if she has more disadvantage in that, more than a man can. Absolutely. But a man can never endure what a woman has to endure on a monthly basis or every time she goes into labor. There's no it's not even imaginable to us what a woman has to endure, right? Whereas a woman can, if she really
women can't imagine how
become more muscular or have more masculine
strength. Is really painful, though.
Okay, and you're making jokes about this.
No,
right?
I'm serious.
But,
It's
okay,
quite
and
painful.
then finally,
we hang around we walk around with fucking
yes,
painful.
We're very vulnerable.
We're very vulnerable.
Because our
We're
genitals
very
are on the
vulnerable.
outside. Yes, okay. They're vulnerable. We make them so. Maybe that's part of the whole weak preying on the strong thing. Maybe that's another example. I thought you were joking, but maybe. Okay, so finally, when it comes to class, which is the only identitarian group that really matters, everything else is somewhat superficial, in my opinion. Yeah. The only one that really matters, white people, black people, okay, we're generalizing a little bit. Men, women, okay, there are women who have a lot of masculine tendencies and men who have a lot of feminine tendencies and whatever. Ethnicity, whatever, we're not even sure any of this stuff is real. It's kind of a social construct on some level. Class is entirely a social construct, right? Class is entirely a social construct. So you have a small group of people who prey on, like, let's say it's 5%, maybe 1% at times during the Dark Ages, who prey on 95%. I'll give you another Game of Thrones reference. When the High Sparrow, the religious Gandhi figure, who gets killed later on, confronts the Queen of Thorns when they have an argument, or she confronts him. He's like, have you ever plowed the field? Have you ever tilled have you ever been part of the processes of this? No, you're just exploiting your workers. And he goes, you are the few, we are the many. And when the many stop fearing the few, there are all these ways in which, in the medieval context especially, which Game of Thrones is playing off of, chivalry and the virtues of this, where they drape themselves in all these cloaks and all these ablutions, the rich people, to convince the poor people that they're like gods and that you don't mess with them. Because otherwise, why on earth would poor people take crap from a small percentage of people who can't even plow their own fields, who are completely idle in addition to being completely overwhelmed? The only way to do it is for the weak to prey on the strong. Right, psychologically.
Voltaire apparently said that, of course there's no God, but don't tell my servant lest he slit my throat in the night.
Voltaire said that?
Yeah.
It was very dark, Voltaire.
Did you know Voltaire is responsible for the whole myth of the apple falling in the head of Newton?
Is he?
Yeah.
Tell me that story. I want to hear that story.
No, because there's that story does not exist. Voltaire's always been colorful in the way he tells stories, and the idea of gravity, Newton.
Right, because I knew it was not true, right? That Newton
it's
saw an apple.
True.
But they teach us this like it's. I can't stand.
Scripture. Yeah.
I can't stand when they lie to kids. Why do they lie to kids? Because it's a fun little story. No, I mean, okay. Well, there's that. Yeah, actually, I would never try to tell my kid. I don't think I would. Maybe the wonderment of it, but there's no wonderment in Newton discovering gravity.
It depends on we don't have Santa Claus. We have Joro Karaj. If they fuck with you, if the kids.
Tell me that.
You don't know that story?
No. I know T is in Joro. I don't know Joro. I know Mambo Kilo.
No,
I don't know Joro.
So what you know the Joro Karaj? Joro Karaj is the.
She apparently doesn't know. Tell us about Joro Karaj. Maybe it's not as popular a thing as you think.
Maybe it's my
Tell us about it.
Maybe it's just my family. No, there's no way it's just my family.
I heard of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not my family.
I think I've heard the term too, but what is it?
Because the whole idea is when kids misbehave, then
you cut their ear off.
Absolutely. The guy walks around cutting people's ears off. I guess the Western society, they have positive reinforcement. Santa Claus gives you gifts. Right. We have negative reinforcement.
That is very Ethiopian.
You don't get gifts.
You don't do what you say. You get your ear cut. Yeah,
that's what you get to keep your ears. Right. Don't fuck around because you're gonna,
Yeah, that sounds like Habesha society I've always known and loved. But we were talking about something. What were we talking about? We were talking about the weak preying on the strong.
Yes.
And Voltaire and the apple, yeah. So the education thing, I'm sorry, we were talking about self-education. I hate that institutional education mythologizes certain historical figures. I
always thought that you were for education, formal education.
Well, I didn't say that I was against formal education.
No, are you for that though?
Of course I'm for formal education. What, you think I want schools to stop running?
No, not necessarily.
Who's not for formal education?
But you're all for the idea of but it's just
informal education as well, yeah. To complement it, yeah. I think that most learning takes place outside, if not the context of institutionality, outside the context of mandatory.
Do you think formal education benefits society on the whole?
Yes, I do. Of course, I do. I think in part because of
I don't mean literacy. I don't mean.
Yeah, no. And well, that's one way. basic skills, socialization, that and this and that. But I think
Most
ultimately
kids get bullied.
okay. But
Right?
I think well, you have to confront being bullied at some point because life is bullying.
No,
But
I know.
bullying
But
is
most
part
kids
of life.
don't confront it. That's what I mean.
Right, but they confront it even less if they're homeschooled. So okay,
Were you
so
a bully?
no.
Sure,
I was
you sound
much
like-
more of a target. Much more of a target. Usually, I don't know. I don't remember. It's not that important.
Yeah.
But like, what were we talking about? Yeah. So even in formal education context, I think that informal avenues or less mandatory and more voluntary avenues of pursuing education are really what's most viable or what allows for real learning, right? Like oral presentation or individualized projects or the Montessori system, the middle school concept, a lot of those ideas. That's really what I'm pushing on here. And I'm not saying
So
that
that's
we
what I
shouldn't
meant by
have
formal
formal
education.
education.
That's what
I'm
I meant.
I'm
Formal
saying
education in the sense that it's as it is today, not the Montessori system.
Well, I would say I'm not trying to get rid of it. I would say I would push for certain kind of reforms that allow, for instance, as I've said on the station before, it is an act of lunacy. Absolutely. To have, well, I haven't said it yet, act of lunacy to have a system where the Madamet is what they call it, where I'm sorry if this sounds like I'm criticizing the government, but this has been an old system that has nothing to do with the current government or the previous one. It's just the way we do things here. Yeah, no, but really, this is not a political issue. This is specifically education policy. It does not make sense to force somebody to go to a specific place to study a subject that they have no interest in. Whether it's because they have bad grades or because there's a quota system, there should be no quota system. It doesn't make any sense. People are not going to learn if you force them into going to a certain place. People should be able to have choice, at least in where they go to school and what they learn.
Not
even
where.
in a public education. Yes,
in
where?
What I mean is in the current state of affairs, where doesn't really matter that much. Because everywhere seems similar to me.
Really, you see no difference between Jimma, Mekelle, Addis Ababa, and Arumanj?
I'm thinking not just from a simplistic local point of view. I mean, did you notice that education seems to be? Because think about how fast the world developed, right? The past few years. The past, we're talking 20th century. All of us were born during the 20th century, right?
Correct.
Century.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about a time when every aspect of science and education, and not education, formal education, but what I mean is every aspect of science and living has completely changed. Right?
Correct,
completely. We're talking antibiotics and cell phones and sexuality, whatever. Every aspect of it has changed. I think that the one sector that has changed the least, it was one of the most neglected areas in the world, is education. Education in the sense of we're still living in a time when how much has changed about education when you really think about it is we're still living in an era where it's early systems. It's not just updating textbooks. I mean the systems where you ring a bell and the kids go out and isn't it based on the early industrial era? Because the idea of education early on was to train kids to be good for factory workers. That's why you have uniforms and that's why you have bells. That's why you have kids going in with uniforms at a certain time in the morning and they cannot afford to be late. If they're late, they get in trouble, right? Because when they graduate, when they go to the fucking factories, then this is going to be a problem if they get used to getting late. And then you have break time, where they learn something even if they don't need it, if they don't enjoy it. You learn something because what education does is train kids for the industrial era. The idea of asking permission to pee is very factory worker based.
I agree. That's a great point, yeah.
So
that's what we mean by socialization.
But exactly.
Also,
now, when you think about every aspect of society right now, one of the most neglected areas is education for kids, which is somehow ironically the most useful aspect.
You think it's because of the departure away from the industrial era?
I say it's because the people that decide what matters in life are people that are past school.
I think there's a lot to do that. I think it has to do with the wage structure and the economy as well. The rewards are no longer tied to doing well in school the way they used to be. I think that's especially an issue in Ethiopia. But because I have a lot of views about the wage crisis and the education crisis in Ethiopia in particular. But regardless, I think you're right about almost all the points that you just made. You made a very good case just now. But
just now?
Yeah, you made other good cases in the past as well. No, but you made a good case just now. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that again, I don't want to go into a false dichotomy between formal and informal education. School is going to exist and probably should exist, but regardless, is going to exist.
School should exist, but
right,
you
formal
say that it's the most
education.
neglected.
I don't think formal education in and of itself is neglected. I think the problem is that we have a false dichotomy we've created between formal education, where everything is imposed on you, and informal education, where you go out and do what you want. You be some kind of artistic, creative, gay type.
Yeah.
I don't think that's.
Gays aren't happy.
I'm using stereotypes, but that's what I mean. And people think, oh, it's this artistic, creative, narcissistic guy, and then this other person is doing what they say. They're just answering the question, and they're doing so to get a job in the industrial blah 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 blah. That's sort of like the way old people think about a lot of this stuff, right? But there is a false dichotomy here because schooling is necessary. The school system can be improved upon. There's no reason.
Schooling is necessary.
Yeah, I'm not trying to revolutionize school, right? I'm not saying that people shouldn't go to school.
That's the only thing that's not revolutionized, though.
Okay, I'm talking about reformism, right?
Yeah.
Reforming the policy of school. And one area since this station is about self-education and this whole question, but at the same time about the relationship between modern and foreign, one thing that we could adapt from American education and from Western education in general is, for one thing, understand that there are a lot of special needs students beyond people who are just obviously autistic. Beyond dyslexia. A good percentage of quote-unquote normal children have some version of either semi-autistic, semi-Asperger's, or semi-dyslexic, or some reading comprehension issue, or some learning disorder or learning imbalance. Yeah. And we have to address that. Because a lot of Western schools are starting to, and it's necessary because a lot of studies are finding that a lot of people have those issues.
So you're talking about what we should adapt from the West. I'm saying, what should the West also change?
So let me answer the first question first. Yeah. So some malleability, right? Some flexibility is necessary. Some in our education policy to incorporate that. And I say this as somebody who taught at schools that had.
You sound like somebody who taught at schools.
That incorporated that in Western education systems. Okay, and then. But more importantly than that, that's when it comes to special needs. And I've addressed special needs teachers in Addis Ababa before about these issues, saying, like, I've been diagnosed with Asperger's. A lot of people are diagnosed with a lot of stuff in the U.S. because, let's not be infidel. Okay. So because this is an important question, right? Honestly, it is. It's more important than whether or not we think Tupac was killed by the government.
It's more important,
right? But so that's one aspect of this. But as far as education policy, to give students more choice, to give them more time before they have to choose. I mean, the metric system and all this stuff about when you're in 10th grade, how about you decide what you want to do, whether you want to go to a liberal arts or social science or natural sciences.
Now you're being the black and white guy.
You're too young at 2021. Absolutely. Even though you have to.
Absolutely.
At some point you have to. But you're too young in 2021 to choose what you want to do for the rest of your life, let alone 15 or 14. Yeah. Right? So some more choice, some more flexibility, some more Montessori type, some more individualization, smaller class sizes, right? Better paid teachers, incentivized teacher, because the strength of the teacher is the most important factor in you know what I mean? But mostly, let's read educational research that finds these things, and let's try to apply that to Ethiopia.
That's exactly
that was the answer. That was the long-winded answer to your first question.
That wasn't even what I was talking about.
Okay, go ahead.
Because my point is not we need more. I don't feel like we found the solution, and that informal education is the way.
Okay.
What I was trying to say was, since we're talking about the past 100 years, right? Past at least 100 years, Khalid, every other field has sort of researched and experimented to find better ways constantly. Every month, if we're talking about technology, it develops.
Except for education.
Exactly.
In the Western case, you mean?
In the global, if we're talking
global,
because we say Western, we mean global, right? In this case.
Okay.
So what I was trying to say is not that the solution is already there. I don't mean that we should have been less formal and we should go the Montessori way. What I mean is school somehow, which despite its importance, because nobody can deny how important it is for the next generation of people, right? Emotionally and sociologically speaking, right? The amount of research that went into finding alternate systems is very minimal. And then we have very few options. And I don't think those options are enough. Because here's the thing. The number of cell phone brand options we have, that should have been education. Education should have been at least one of the most important ways. Because medicine is very important. You know why? Because the people that can pay for it can usually kind of invest to live longer.
Correct, yeah.
But most people, when we reach that age, when we're kids, we want a different education system. But once we're out of school, we don't give a fuck, right? We just want to be, we want better Vicodin, we want better phones, we want better chance of getting laid, chance of making more friends, chance of looking better, chance of getting better jobs.
Right.
Most of us don't really care that much about investing, and by most of us, I mean the people that can afford to pay for that research. They don't care to change the way their kids learn. Right. So if it was, I think that's what socialism would have changed. Because socialism is not just about what you prefer. It's about what would have helped the society, right, or the state. So education, considering how important it is, because we all talk about how the next generation, tomorrow's kids, are important, right? If it's really that important, then it should have been as important as medicine. The same way we have 10 types of Viagra, then it should have been as important to have well-researched different types of educational systems. But we don't. We have formal education and then all types of hipster education, like you said, Montessori school or whatever. But it should have been the most researched thing. If we really do care about what happens tomorrow, we should have found a system that makes people, because we're talking about not just education but self-esteem and how to survive in society and how to find your niche, right? But we don't. We still don't have that. We absolutely do not have that. Whether we like it or not, all three of us in this room, when we have kids, we're probably going to send them to formal education, and they're going to go through the same thing we went through. And yeah, sure, they study physics, but will they actually learn? Will it equip them with the lessons that they need to learn? And that could be the problem. That could be the vicious cycle. Why even today we're so confused about how, I mean, we can send man to the moon, but people still can't believe the Earth is not flat. You know what I mean?
It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing.
It is, but
they're flat earthers.
Should it be that amazing when we actually send kids?
I want to read a book about how do you explain the existence of flat earthers. In what you just said, you send a man to a moon, and then 50 years later, I mean that and the obsession. I don't want to get into politics, but the obsession worldwide with identity and ethnicity and race. 50 years after a time when people were banding together in all these anti-colonial liberation struggles and decolonization, and people were Africa was uniting, and black people were uniting, and women were struggling, and there was all these higher ideals, and the fact that ever since the Berlin Wall fell, everybody's identifying based on bloodlines. Combined with what we just described. 50 years ago, somebody put a man on the moon. 50 years later, people are like, "Wait, are you sure the Earth's not flat?" And it actually caught on. These are examples of like
social media is somewhat to blame.
Yeah, without question, but only somewhat, right? It's not the cause of the problem. It's not the root of the problem. It's just a symptom.
It's not.
But clearly, we're in a situation where things are getting much more. There's a devolution that's taking place, especially when it comes to education, especially when it comes to the way people think. And I don't know if that's because of the triumphalism of the international liberal world order, but regardless, I think that's a good place for us to actually stop. We've explored quite a few topics, from a discussion that started off about music to talking, as we often end up doing, about race, ethnicity, about identity, and about the concept of art in general, and ultimately we ended up with education. So it puts a nice little bow tie on all of this. Although we'll see about possibly picking up with a similar discussion tomorrow. We want to bring on another filmmaker, and possibly Kidus will be there for that discussion. But these discussions are becoming more and more. These conversations are becoming more varied in nature and in content, and going in more and more interesting directions. So I really like where this is going. And Kidus, thank you so much for all of your invaluable contributions to the station as we move forward. And this has been Ras Temari Radio.